Welcome to Jaguar Sharks Talks. I am your host, Jesse. Today I have with me Miss Maureen Ryan. You are a writer of this book that I picked up, blind bought, by the way. Burn It Down. I picked this up blind in a bookstore one day because I saw the cover and I said, yep, that's totally for me. You've written for Vanity Fair, Huffington Post. God, the list goes on and on and on of everything you've worked on. So tell me, how
Wow.
did you get into this business of doing this work behind the scenes
This
for the film
were
business?
what were the mistakes that I made to get down this path? No, first of all, like it's such a high compliment. When you reached out and said you had just blind bought it. I mean, part of the reason I'm very glad that my editor was a champion of that title, and then she really did a great job of pushing the design to be what you saw in the store. And what's fun is that when I go in a store now, I can see, like, even if it's just the spine showing, I can see that bright red. But
Hmm.
we've even just had some stories coming out recently where I'm just like, yes, burn it down. This is how I feel about the industry. I feel like it's an
Yep.
evergreen title. Um, I really, I mean, I don't know. I was always a pop culture addict. I actually, in the 80s and 90s, was very involved in the music scene. So I was in some bands that were terrible, and I was a rock critic, and just a lot of freelancing around the arts. And I eventually ended up getting a master's degree in journalism because I did a lot of traveling in my 20s, and I ended up nonfiction feels to me like the right space for where my brain naturally feels at home. I have written fiction, not a lot, none for public consumption, but I definitely have tried to write scripts, write other kinds of work, but really my home quadrant, if you will, is not the nonfiction world. So I, went to journalism school, did a lot of just regular, plain vanilla journalism, but civic affairs, urban coverage, that kind of thing. And I'm really glad I went to journalism school because they had a pass fail system that if you even got one thing wrong in an article, you got an F, which
Mm.
that will that is a come to Jesus moment that I feel like a lot of journalists can learn from.
Yeah.
And
Get it
um,
right the first time.
get it right the first time because you are writing about people's real lives. I'll never forget, literally over 30 years ago, I wrote an article about it, um, a very large suburb of Chicago, their school board meeting, and I got someone's name wrong. Now, that might be the only time they ever had their name in the newspaper, and they were annoyed, and that's fair. And I also think, and you can tell me if you agree, if a writer's getting the small stuff wrong, I instantly begin to, like, my spidey senses are definitely
Question the big stuff.
wonky. I'm going to question the big stuff. There's a big dog journalist who I'm sure makes many multiples of what you and I will ever make, who basically did try to do a rehabilitation of a guy who was minorly involved in kind of a Me Too situation. The guy still has all of his income streams intact, but it was like, oh, this poor man was canceled, and it's like, no, he still makes six figures. What is happening?
Yeah.
There's kind of this, like, let's just rethink what happened to this guy. He met the guy at a bookstore. He got the street that the bookstore was on wrong. Now, this is a guy who's been like a very high profile journalist for a long time, and other details of the story were wrong, and a bunch of the people who had been part of the let's hold this man accountable for his inappropriate actions, they all clowned this big time journalists on social media saying, you got this wrong. You didn't even talk to these other sources who were willing to talk to you. You didn't do the due diligence on that. So I think I really do sweat every detail. That was part of the legacy of journalism for me, and part of working for a big city daily like the Chicago Tribune, because it's not really important how I ended up there, but I was essentially, I was in touch with various people there because I was doing so much freelance arts coverage. They eventually hired me, and every story I've had probably that I've done for since probably the mid '90s has had my email address at the end of it.
Hmm.
So when people are like,
In case there needs
"Oh,
to be a change
people,"
or a retraction or something like that.
yeah, well, or just reactions of any kind. And it's a great it's a great tool in terms, I mean, sometimes it wasn't so fun, but it's like people are going to have a reaction to what you say. If you make a case, you should make it strongly, and you should, really, really make it, really be granular and detailed. People will react and they will tell you about it, whether it was email back in the day or until social media now. So, get the facts right, feel very solid about what you're presenting, whether it's a critical argument, an interview, Q&A, that kind of thing. There was one glitch a long time ago. This still lives in my memory, rent free. Some button that somebody pushed on the copy desk made all of the names in an article I wrote about the Shield wrong. So it was Victoria Mackey. It was
Hmm.
like it was like every name in Sean Ryan's name. So this was still when like print was more dominant than online. So I fixed
Right.
the
Yeah.
online version, of course, but like the amount of reaction I got from people was, and I actually emailed Sean Ryan, who I've now known for like 800 years. It's like, I promise you, I did not have a stroke while writing this. But anyway, so that's sort of, I had a very long and fruitful grounding in whether it's criticism or a feature or a reported piece, you know, get the small stuff right, the medium stuff right, and then people will trust you over time on the big stuff. And I really, honestly, that might be a segue to my in-depth reporting about the industry, which, I've been doing bigger in-depth pieces for more than 20 years on various topics. But it's interesting, people have asked me a lot since the book came out, like, how did you get into this misconduct reporting or Hollywood, toxic Hollywood behavior and that sort of stuff. When all of that kind of broke open in a bigger way, because you and I both know it did not start happening in 2017
No,
and
I have
it
plenty
was
of stories and I'm willing to
right,
share.
a lot of stories. Basically, where I was placed within the Hollywood, I think, ecosystem was someone who had been covering TV, to some degree film, but more TV for a while, and didn't seem like someone who was sloppy or lazy, seemed like someone who cared. So, a lot of what I've done for years, even before Me Too broke open, was kind of do journalism triage. And people would come to me with something, and I would be like, well, here's what we would need to do, or here's how we would go about it. And then if people are like, you know what, I don't want to move forward, I'd be like, cool. My brain's like a sieve, so I will probably forget this, which is maybe to both our benefits. Um, so yeah, I did a lot of reporting at various places on various topics. I was always just fascinated by television. That's really my home medium. I love it so much. I do a lot of rewatches all the time. I love what the North American, and UK commercial television machinery has produced by and large. I don't love how that has been destroyed and stripped for parts, in more recent years
Yeah.
by Silicon Valley and, you know, private equity, but whatever, that's maybe for another
Yeah.
time. But um, yeah, I began covering more and more TV. I did more kind of general pop culture in my first years of the Tribune. A lot of editing, a lot of general pop culture. But then, I mean, imagine the year 2000 or 2002, whenever it was Survivor arrives, and
Oh, yeah, that
nobody
was
at the Tribune
huge.
was writing about Survivor because, you still run into people. I never watch reality TV, and I'm sitting there going, I mean, the twin explosions of American Idol and Survivor, and then what was going on in the more adventurous basic cable and premium cable realms in the aughts. It was just like, whoa, I stepped on the escalator at the perfect time. I essentially wrote about a lot of that stuff because other people weren't. And I was like, this is just interesting to me. This show, Battlestar Galactica, I find is interesting. And so
Mhm.
I ended up on the TV beat, and that was, again, like a very, very, I was writing a lot about TV and pop culture before that, but then about 22 years ago, I began writing about TV full time. And it's very funny to me that even in the aughts, I was like, there's too much TV, too much to keep up with, because I really like to just sort of cover the waterfront,
Yeah.
but that became not realistic fairly
Yeah.
early
Fast
on.
forward to now when it's like there's so many streaming services and there's so many shows. It's like
Exactly. There's so
it's
much
just
to
too
get
much.
to.
Yeah.
Well, and honestly, so I was at the Tribune and then Huffington Post and Variety. And Variety was my last staff critic job. And part of the reason I left, there's a whole million different reasons I could talk about that. It was partly to do more in depth things like the book, which I'm really proud of. And I don't think I could have done while on staff anywhere. It just was too consuming. But um, I really wanted more time to just actually think about the TV that I write about and not have to review every new show coming down the pike. I wanted to be able to
Yeah.
go back and be like, hey, I want to do a story about Warrior, which people aren't watching. So let me do a feature about how Bruce Lee had this vision and then his daughter and Justin Lin brought it to fruition. And, like, I would rather do a deep dive on something I really care about and I'm interested in. And God bless my friends who are still staff critics at a lot of these various outlets. It's a tough job, and you really, really work hard. But yeah, I wanted to be able to branch out a bit and not have the fire hose just constantly trained upon me. It's too much.
Yeah. Especially now with there's so much television out there. There's so many films that have come out this year, and personally for me, getting to the content of the book that you wrote, because of my anger and cynicism towards the business and how I was treated in the last couple of years of my time there,
Sure.
I've turned in my card since then. So I'm out
Yeah.
of the business. So if I drop anybody's name, you probably deserve it.
Yeah,
Um,
I 100% endorse. Yes.
yeah. So there's so much out there to watch, and it's reached a point where it means that there's a lot more scummy stuff happening behind the scenes.
Mhm.
And after the Me Too movement, everyone says, "Oh, well, it all kind of died down." No, it just kind of
Right.
went underground.
Yes.
They
Yes.
hide it better. They hide
They
it much
hide it
better.
better. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. No, I mean, this is the thing that people don't want to say, and I don't. I still love the best people in the industry. I still love what the best of what the industry does. I
Hmm.
still think that what the high level people who make big proclamations about better work environments don't want to say out loud because it makes them sad. But the truth is, they will get into business with anyone if they think they can make a dollar from it.
Yeah.
They will get
Yeah.
into business with anybody. I mean, maybe not Scott Rudin, but I'm still waiting for that dude to come back. And Scott Rudin, as
Oh
I as
man, the whole chapter
I
on
made
him.
that chapter in my book really, really the second chapter in my book. Like basically, it's an intro and then straight into Scott Rudin because I'm like, Scott Rudin does not come back unless a lot of very big multimedia conglomerates decide he gets to come back.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's like A24, they're so great. They're such beautiful, small bean baby juice, just perfect, company. I asked A24, will you ever work with Scott Rudin again? They wouldn't even comment. So
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for that guy to come back, which again, he doesn't come back unless these big firms pony up that money for him to be able to come back and roll out the red carpet. Oh, well,
Hmm.
he's changed. I'm like, please, he got a friggin' juice cleanse and a guru who told him he's perfect. Don't give
Yeah.
me this, BS. Just you want to make money more than ever. These corporations are driven by a truly insane approach to trying to make money. Which there's a writer that I quoted in the book. This guy Ed Zitron, and a lot of what he writes about is like the what he calls the rot economy. Essentially, they want number go up forever. There's nothing that grows forever that
Yeah.
doesn't create enormous destruction. In medicine, that's just basically the blanket term for cancer, something that won't stop growing.
Yeah.
So there's these unrealistic expectations around profit and making money and the exploitation of the people actually making the stuff. I don't think it's better. I mean, I don't know. Again, you were in the trenches. The people I talked to, I do think that the strikes were necessary. I do think that those lines had to be drawn. I still also think that the industry is still in a very painful contraction. And what I'm sure you have had this reaction too, or I'm guessing, the strike did not cause the industry slowdown. The industry slowdown and contraction was happening before that
Yeah.
because the geniuses at the newer streamers and all of that did a bunch of things that were terrible for the industry, and they're still doing them. And then the chickens kind of came home to roost, and it wasn't
Yeah.
sustainable. And who's paying the price for that? It's not the CEOs, it's the
It's
working
us.
stiffs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's us. Yeah, like I saw a report recently. I think I can't remember if it was Variety or Vanity Fair, but it said that apparently Warner Brothers is in debt to its investors
Oh yeah.
$40 billion.
Right. And again,
They're really banking on Superman, aren't they?
for 3 years, I have been saying this on various social media. David Zaslav, in 1 year,
Oh,
one pay cycle, made $246 million overall in the last 10 years, 10, 12 years. That bro has made more than $1 billion for presiding
mhm.
over the absolute total destruction of many Hollywood institutions that, again, we're perking along fine and not losing money for the most part. You know what I mean? He just really, this is just the insane pressure that the industry is under. And unfortunately, like, I love to clown Zaslav because, basically fuck that guy is how I generally feel. He's just
I
everything
agree.
wrong with the industry in one executive package. But he's just the avatar. He's just the symptom of
Yeah.
what they are all about. And it makes other, top execs uncomfortable because they're doing the same dumb stuff, same destructive stuff. They just don't want to be called out on it.
Yeah. It just I get it, it's a business, I get it's an industry, but
Sure.
it's at the expense of
Hmm.
everybody else. Like, what can you do with $241 million that you can't do with 10?
I
Like, what?
exactly. And, it is at the expense of everyone else. And it's the expense of, and I feel really strongly about this, I literally wrote a book about everything that was wrong with the commercial North American television machine in terms of conduct and so called norms behind the scenes. That being said, the American television industry was a money machine. It was a money printing machine. If
Yeah.
you owned a piece of Friends, if you even had a tiny slice of ER, you would be set for life. And God bless. I'm If we're going to do capitalism, great. Let's have
And yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
share in the bounty, right? Now the
Yeah.
model is as Mike Schur told me for a story I did for Vanity Fair, it's the hugest bait and switch that's ever been pulled in this town, which is saying something. Oh, don't you won't have any back end rights, but look at this great deal we're going to give you. By season, we're going to give you all these kind of bonus payments, and we're going to structure it so that by seasons 4, 5, 6, my friend, you're going to be rolling in dough.
And then they
And then
cancel it
everyone
at season
figures
3.
out season 3 is all you're getting. It's that,
Mhm.
So then we're left in a situation where I would love to figure out how do we create the next Shonda Rhimes, the next Norman Lear, because the thing is, everybody is just scrambling to get 24 weeks work on an 8 episode show if they can get that,
Yeah.
and maybe that's all that they're going to get in a 2 year time frame. And I do understand not everyone wanted to do 22 episodes, but the 18, 20, 22 episode season, interestingly enough, my friend Joe Adalian, who works at Vulture, had a story about how the new network shows that are doing that have been actually really successful.
Mhm.
Things like Elsbeth and Matlock and shows of that nature. And they're
Yeah.
bringing back a Suits spinoff because people, this very, like, what they've done, what these super financial geniuses have done is make the thing that their people know how to make really well, make it disposable and less necessary than ever. So
Yeah.
good job, everybody.
Yeah. Shows like that typically run those kinds of length, they're typically they're considered like trashy TV, like they're disposable, they're the one-off episodes that you can kind of
Or even,
watch an
I mean,
episode
the
and
thing
forget
is,
it.
everyone watches TV for different reasons, and I even have
Yeah.
different reasons
Yeah.
myself. But I just watched Black Doves on Netflix. I just clowned Netflix and want to say, okay, you know what? That was really fun. I like the band inside. on Netflix, some newer shows of theirs. Those are the man A Man on the Inside by Mike Schur. Those are shows that do just fine at 6 and 8 episodes, right? And if I
Yeah.
only get 4 seasons of Black Doves, whatever, it's fine. Whatever, those actors are going to want to move on. That's okay.
I always said that
Um,
the Marvel Netflix shows should have always been like 6 to 8 episodes because that's the amount of story that they had.
they exactly so,
Oh
but not
god.
everything should be shoved into that mold. And
Yeah.
I mean, Marvel, oh my gosh, we could do a whole podcast about how they completely biffed it on the television front multiple times, not just
Yeah.
once. Not completely biffed it, but like they,
How about make a Punisher show that actually is a Punisher show and is not a guy walking around doing nothing for 13
well, as I
episodes?
wrote about in the book, they came a lot, and I've seen this my whole career, sadly. Oh, Jesse, it's been like I'll see waves of people come into the TV space and be like, "Well, let me tell you how you're doing it wrong. We'll do it right." And the thing is, I'm not going to say it's only film people coming to TV, but that's been a recurrent theme in my career. If you're coming from film into TV, probably what you want to do is listen to the people who know how to make TV. Sure,
Yeah.
bring your perspective to it. But what Marvel did in the TV realm, that first round of shows, and I actually thought the first season of Jessica Jones was pretty good. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
all terrible, but it was, they were just whatever, trying things. Then they reshuffle, do a whole new like round of shows, most of which I'm gonna tell you, I don't think are that good. I don't think I'm in the. I did like WandaVision.
Mhm.
It's not like it's all been a big miss, but a lot of it's been a miss. And um, that what I heard, and this is, and Marvel is very far from being the only one to do this. In film, and especially in a big tentpole film, this, the writer, they'll just go through writers like you and I go through paper towels. Like you
Oh
just
god,
like
yeah.
throw a new person on this week and that week, and you know whoever's credited, we all know that that's not like who really wrote every word in the script. That's
Yeah,
very rare.
there's a thing I want to talk about with the first X-Men movie if you let me
Oh
jump in on that
God.
one. Yeah, I
And
also
so,
my
but they
second
tried to bring that to TV, which is,
yeah.
let's just have a director who's really in charge of this,
Yeah.
and or have they don't really have a showrunner anymore. So from, let's say, from
They feel like
beginning
committee thing kind of.
the first pitch meeting to the last day of post, they didn't believe in having one singular person. I mean,
Mm,
unless it was someone really connected, and the other big IP shops are like this. It's very rare to get someone who is with it from pitch meeting to end of post, and then it's even more rare to have someone who has a great deal of power and a vision. They're not hiring, David Chase to make a Thor show, right? And I do
yeah.
not mean to diss the people who are making those shows. A lot of talented people work on those shows and they're doing really well. But I think another thing I've noticed a lot is that with a lot of the IP derived stuff, you know, they want people who are going to ascend, who need the gig, more or less.
Yeah.
And
One of my
they
notes
just
is
toss
just is
people as
yeah.
soon as they're not, compliant.
Yeah. One of my notes is when you get on set, shut up and do your job. That one of the things that I noted when I was reading this that hit me really hard was when you show up to your job, don't show enthusiasm. That hit so fucking hard for me because when I
Wow.
first got into the business in 2008, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be on film sets. It'd be awesome. It'd be great. The first film I worked on, I did a single day on that movie Salt, that crappy Angelina Jolie ripoff of Jason Bourne. I did one day
Mhm.
on that. Everybody on set looked like they were miserable.
Mhm.
I didn't see one person smile, not one. It's like you
Isn't
guys
that
are
a fun
making a
experience
movie.
when you're like, "Oh God, did somebody die? What's happening? What's going on?" Like I've
Yeah.
been in production offices like that too, where you're like,
Why does it feel like a funeral home?
the vibe is not good. It's not good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very rare for me to ever be on a film set where everybody felt like they were there and enjoying it.
Mhm.
I've noticed this in the comic book business as well. I have a lot of people that work in the comics industry. A
Yeah.
lot of people
Sure.
that work in the comics business, like the film business, they don't like comic books. They're just there because it's a job.
Right.
I know there's a lot of people that work in like the accounting department at DC Comics. They're just there because it's a job.
It's a
It's a
job.
job. Like,
Yes.
that's all it
Yes.
is. And, that's fine. If that's all you want, I understand that, but at the same time, it's like, you could go anywhere else and make
Mhm.
generally the same amount of money.
Yeah,
Go do
sometimes
something
I
you
sit
like.
there and go with people in Hollywood, it's like, you do not like commercial American television and film. You could go be an accountant or a
Yeah,
firefighter or a nurse. Like, what, why are you part of this thing that you appear to vociferously despise? That seems not good. I don't know what the story is there, but
yeah,
yeah, I mean, as I put in the book, some people I think in the industry, and this is true of many creative industries, unfortunately, um, it's a friend of mine who does a newsletter, Ann Helen Peterson. I think they call it like the passion trap. There's a lot of professions where people go into, photography, filmmaking, comics, television, like it's something that seems so cool, fashion. You know what I mean? All these creative fields, but what those fields run on is that enthusiasm.
mhm,
It's basically more bodies to throw into the grinder that they can underpay, overwork, exploit, and then the person themselves, when they start to feel these feelings of burnout and cynicism and sadness and betrayal, a lot of people beat themselves up.
yeah,
Like, oh gosh, I'm just not trying hard enough, and I don't have a thick enough skin, or it's like, no, systematically, the creative professions, unfortunately, in their commercial forms, are very often set up to take advantage of the enthusiasm of those without power, who is, on every set, that's like 99% of everybody, right?
yeah.
That's 99% of any creative field are the powerless.
You get into the film business because you're like, "Oh, I love movies. I wanna work on a movie. I
Hmm.
wanna work on TV shows." Like, I got in for that reason. I studied
Right.
film since I was a junior in high school, and for 20 some odd years, I was like, "Yeah, this is my obsession." This
Right.
year, after I turned in my card in September this year, and I just recently got my annuity check withdrawn from, was it Principal Accounting? I got, like, $7,400. Not a lot of money, but I came back from New York with $100. And
Right.
I burned through my savings in New York because I was out of work.
Of
I
course.
got 1 day on Law& and Order in January of 2023, and that was my last union job. That was my last
Wow.
one. Yeah, so, uh, this year in total, I've seen 5 movies in theaters.
Hmm.
I used to see a movie a week. Now I've seen 5 in theaters. I saw Dune Part 2, which I loved, Deadpool& and Wolverine, which I had a lot of fun, not deep or complicated,
Hmm.
but I laughed a lot. Civil War, which I fucking hated. It's like, how dare you make an apolitical Civil War movie? A Brit trying to
Right.
tell Americans to not be divisive? Yeah, oh, fuck off. You don't have a
Oh,
lot of room to
wow.
move on that. Uh,
Right.
Furiosa, which I thought was fun, though not as good as Fury Road. And I saw Alien Romulus. It's the greatest fan film ever made.
Oh, wow. I mean, yeah, I, the funny thing about film for me is that I for many years I thought of myself as like the television monk. Like, I just, to keep up even partially with TV. Like,
Yeah,
I don't have, people are like, what do you do for fun? I'm like, I don't know. My poor husband who just walked through the room, he's watched a lot of bad TV with me to kind of like be in the trenches with me. But yeah, a lot of our life for many years was dominated by, what are the new shows coming out this week, checking them out,
yeah.
trying to keep that enthusiasm alive. um, but yeah, it's it's crazy. I Weirdly enough, I think that I have kind of begun healing my relationship with just simply enjoying TV. I do think that being a staff critic for 20 years, I'll never forget that one of my editors, when I first began down this path, was like, "Yeah, it's the kind of job you don't want to, you burn out after 10 years." And I'm like, "What happens after 20?" And so, I mean, I'm not as up to date with a lot of the new series. A critic friend will text me and be like, "Have you seen blah blah blah? What did you think of this screener?" And I'm like, "I don't know, man. I'm kind of
It sounds like
free."
my friend's talking to me. Have you watched Yellow Jackets yet? No.
I'm like, I don't know, man. Yeah, it's funny because I guess I did this to myself. I cultivated a reputation as someone who had seen most everything in the TV space, at least on this side of the pond. And now people are like, "Oh, what do you think of what happened in season 2 of like?" I'm like, "Yeah, I haven't
Yeah,
seen it yet, but
yeah. The only show
yeah."
I'm
But now I have
consistently
a lot
watching right
more.
now.
What's that?
The only show I'm consistently watching right now is the Dune show, Dune Prophecy, because I'm a
Oh,
Dune
what do you think
fanatic.
of that? I haven't checked it out yet. It's one of
Uh,
the ones I'm behind on.
I like it. It's based on the prequel stuff that's written by Brian Herbert, Frank Herbert's son, which is
And
very
I've read those.
divisive.
Yeah, I mean, I've read a lot of those books.
Yeah.
Really, the house books like House Carino and all that. I
Oh,
don't think
yeah.
I read the
It's based around
the other
Sisterhood
one.
of Dune, which is 10,000
Yeah,
years before Paul's birth.
sure.
It's but really the first 10 minutes adapts a lot from that book, and then after that it's all new content.
They're
It's
doing this
all
new
new stuff
thing.
written
Okay.
specifically for the show,
Well,
so it's
that
like
seems
Game of Thrones in
legit.
space. Yeah.
Yeah. I
So
I
yeah,
think I will check it out eventually because I do love the Dune films. I think they're really good.
yeah.
I love
There's one shot in Dune Part 2 I did not like. One shot that it just pissed me off, and it's the shot where Paul wakes up after taking the water of life. It's just a flat shot on his face. He's just like, "Oh, did you enjoy your nap?" It's like, it should be a crash zoom on his face, and the music should
Yeah.
swell. That one
Well,
shot, I
I
was
will.
like, "Hmm."
Yeah. It's funny. There are single shots in movies where I'm just like, "Oh, if you just took that one out," but people don't listen to me, so what are you gonna
Yeah, I think Greg Fraser knows more than me, but he's not coming back for
do?
Doom Messiah, unfortunately. He's working on the Batman Part
Oh,
2.
oh,
Yeah.
why would you want to work on that? That movie to me, the Batman.
You didn't like the
Please,
Batman? I
no.
liked it.
Here's the thing. I'm going to say this. I'm going to preface this by saying overall, I thought the film was just fine. I mean, it wasn't necessarily like my rant and rave, like he's done
It's
it
better than the
again.
Snyder stuff, let's put it that way.
Well, not a high bar to clear. Yeah. So,
Fair.
although I have to say that I did think that his reconception of Justice League, like it's very Zack Snyder, but like if you want what he does, I I feel I actually
He
weirdly
has a
thought,
fan base.
okay, whatever.
He
I
has his
didn't.
yeah.
The thing about the Batman is that it's very like I consider that film a comedy because there's this trend in television too, but there's this trend in the commercial TV machine. The only way that you can connote seriousness, everything is very monochromatic. Everything is monochromatic and it's raining. What is the color palette of the Batman? It's
Red,
all dark.
black. Yeah.
But it's all muted, dark greens, dark blue, dark. And I'm like, this has become like kind of like I mean, you have to understand, Jeffrey, my brain is broken by having watched a lot of terrible TV and film. And there's a very much a hierarchy of what prestigious projects look like. And in this received hierarchy, I don't believe in it. I'm just telling you, there's a perception among a certain segment of Hollywood filmmakers and film and TV. Something is serious if it has rain slicked streets, darker palettes, desaturated colors, lots of shadows, lots of angsty men occupying the center of the frame. That is the hierarchy of, and this is why I thought like for coverage of a show like Jane the Virgin, which flips all of that on the head. Do you think it's easier to make a show about a protagonist who's basically a good but flawed person with bright colors, set in Miami, set in a matriarchal household with multiple Latina women of different ages? That's not what TV regards as a prestigious hierarchy of things to have. But I'm like, what about this show do you think makes it not sophisticated and interesting and thematically complex? Like that, I don't know. I guess a big bugaboo for me is let's at least look dispassionately at what we are using as quality measures. I if Matt Reeves, if that's how he wanted to make the Batman, that's fine. I just find that a lot of it felt visually like a cliche of what a serious film looks like. It's constantly raining. The visuals are constantly kind of dank and depressing, and it's constantly kind of grim and dry. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's one way to come at it. Um,
Would you say the
again,
same
I
of
don't.
Blade Runner though? Because that has the exact same visual
But
palette.
again, I think that the thing about Blade Runner is that it came out 40 years ago. People are still riffing off stuff that Ridley Scott got out of his system before they were born. And I mean, I love Ridley Scott. I think he's got a lot of interesting failures. One of these days, I'm going to get somebody to pay me to do a podcast about Ridley Scott because I think he's absolutely fascinating. his misses are as interesting in a weird way as
I
his
love how
hits.
confrontational he is and just saying like, "Oh, you people in the audience are fucking idiots." I just love how he's an angry Brit.
Well, he's an angry Brit and he has a point of view. And I think that that's one thing, I don't know if you would agree with this, that our culture is missing at the moment with this emphasis on not making anyone mad. Everything has to be a
Yeah,
four quadrant worldwide hit for the multinational
I hate
corporation.
it. I hate it so
But what's
much.
the specific? Here's the thing about, again, I'm not hating on the Batman because Pattinson, the cast was very good. Matt Reeves did his vision, and I'm sure it was focus grouped, and I'm sure that all the executives had plenty to say about it. But at least it was like, this is his coherent take on it. A lot of things I see now, it's nobody's take. It's a focus group's take. It's just
Yeah.
the most safe rendition of this IP based material that could ever exist. And I'm like, okay, sure. That's sir, sir. I guess that's one way to do it, but it's just a lot of stuff I think has been defanged, which is why I really like a big swing. I mean, here's the thing: you might end the podcast and just start cursing me. There were things to like about Furiosa. I thought a lot of it was a swing and a miss, but I love George Miller as a filmmaker
I
so
enjoyed the
much.
movie. I just thought it wasn't as good as Fury Road.
I think Fury Road is one of my favorite films of all time. So it's
Same.
possible that, but the thing is, that is a filmmaker with a vision. I
Yeah.
am seeing what they wanted me to encounter, and I would much rather watch someone who has really a passion to tell this story. And maybe I don't agree with how some of it was done, but you can feel the urgency of, I wanted to make this film, right? As opposed to, I was hired as a work for hire to adapt this piece of material that prior to last week I had no ties to at all,
Mm,
and I was
yeah.
basically directed to make it as safe and inoffensive for as wide a variety of people as humanly possible.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people in the industry are talented and are able to come up with something that is still, watchable and interesting and fun. But I don't know. I it's hard to have a ton of hope about, the next generation of creators, writers, directors, and filmmakers feeling empowered to make interesting stuff. At a certain point, nobody wanted to make Star Wars. The studio
Yeah.
was like, it's over budget. This is terrible. This is like, even George Lucas got fed up with it. He's like, it's gonna fail. It's gonna be a failure. But if they hadn't taken that chance,
Yeah.
who is taking a chance right now with those kinds of visions? I mean, I don't know if I'm seeing it.
That's a fair point. I mean, also with the contraction of the industry and how everybody's over budget, everyone's in the red. I mean, maybe there's like a couple of studios that are doing okay, like Blumhouse, I'm sure is doing fine because they keep their budgets so super low.
Right.
But
And I
it's
would
just,
bet Lucasfilm is still probably doing just fine because
yeah, they're probably
really,
fine. It's like
there's
they make
there's
most
so
of
much
their
licensing around what they do.
yeah, I've heard reports that apparently like Marvel and DC, they don't actually make their most of their money from comic books. They make it mostly from merchandising.
Uh-huh.
It makes sense. Like the stuff that's inspiring the
Absolutely.
films is an afterthought. It's unfortunate.
Yeah,
So
and that it's very unfortunate that, Marvel turned into what they were the reaction against. The
yeah,
first few Marvel films were tight. They had good stories. I'm not saying they were all perfect, but they had charismatic,
they felt like they had
actors.
directors actually doing the movies.
Exactly. And so I think that I genuinely, the last few Marvel films that I saw, I'm like, you have become the bloated, ponderous, directionless, and just incoherent, blobby studio film that you were fighting against 20, 25 years ago. Like when the first Iron Man film came out, we were in this really stagnant moment for most.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously there's the Christopher Nolan Batman films or whatever, but there was just, Marvel came along and said, let's not have these bloated, sprawling productions that don't speak to anything or anyone, that don't speak to the fans, that don't speak to newbies. They're just kind of there. and then they turned into exactly that, and I just think, huh,
Yeah.
okay, I don't get it.
And some of it feels some of their statements in regards to like the feminist icons of their films, like Captain Marvel and things like there's one shot in Avengers Endgame where all the women are gathered in one shot,
Mhm.
even though logically all those characters are separated on the battlefield at the end of the movie.
Mhm.
And it's like it's the girls get it done moment. And I'm thinking to myself,
Mhm.
this is Marvel and this is Disney. I don't buy this as them being legit about this statement.
Not at all. I
I
mean,
mean,
I don't know.
if somebody got that feeling from it, that's
I
great.
can
But for me,
yeah, I
I
mean,
the cynic I am in me is just like, I don't buy it.
well, I mean, I think something that I've had a lot of cause to think about recently is Hollywood is very, very cyclical. And
Yeah,
even in my book, I had people saying, and I certainly wrote it myself as sort of my own opinion. I was like, okay, the rolling back of attempts at inclusion and attempts at diversification of the industry, that is I could see it when I was writing that book 2 years ago. It was already happening
yeah.
but that's what happens because I've covered the matters of exclusion, bias, and things of that nature. I've been covering that from the perspective of stats, numbers, hard numbers, trends over time. I've been covering that stuff for 25 years. So I have a lot of these experiences of there's always the pushback, there's always the rollback. There is nothing this industry loves more than reverting to the mean, as someone in my book said. In reverting to the mean is whatever the suits the very highest levels want. So
Yeah.
just do that. And it's really, really unfortunate that that's happening again. My colleague at Vanity Fair, Joy Press, just had a story about all of this stuff about the right wing has seized upon this idea of DEI and made it into this supervillain
It's like, oh, you hate
entity.
the fact that people that aren't like you work beside you.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
how horrible.
amazing. It's amazing, and the point that I've tried to make over the years is that we've never gotten there in terms of Hollywood, in terms of representation. If it was
Yeah,
truly a meritocracy, then okay, great. 50% of films should be directed by women, studio films.
yeah,
Has that ever happened? No. So we had a blip uh, going up a little bit, but it's more or less these things stay very stable generally over time.
yeah,
But so yeah, I do think that Hollywood loves nothing more than to quietly go back to business as usual, and we know what
yeah,
that generally tends to look like.
yeah. If I could venture into
Yeah,
another
please
comic
go
book
ahead.
movie that's going back to the mean, uh, we're recording this on December 18th. Tomorrow, December 19th, the trailer for James Gunn's new Superman movie comes out. And that is going way back to the Richard Donner stuff, which I'm in
Mhm.
favor of. I did not like the Snyder stuff. I don't like his Ayn Rand take upon Superman. Very inappropriate for
Oh
that
God,
character.
please don't give me a chance to rant about Man of Steel. We will be here all night. Please
Oh,
don't.
I did it.
Please
We have
don't.
we had a show that's now off season, that's now done, called Film Rescue, where we would take a bad movie and we'd pitch a supposedly better version of it. I got a little drunk on that episode. I had to fix it,
Yeah,
and I
I
pitched
think
a
you
better
have to
version.
drink before thinking this.
Yep.
Yeah.
I said some things I probably regret in a drunken stupor, but yeah, we pitched. It was a 3 hour episode,
Yeah.
and then the
I
Batman v
I got to
Superman
go
was
track that down.
Batman
Yeah.
v Superman was 5 hours. It was long
I just
because I couldn't stop
yeah.
finding stuff to complain about. Like
Yeah, no, that's very highly relatable everything you just said.
yeah.
Yes.
While I will say I don't like his version of those stories and those characters, it did feel like his vision.
It's
And
his
then
vision. Yep.
when the studio saw it wasn't profitable and everyone was hating it, and also by the way, DC Comics people didn't like it either. The writers hated it.
No.
They went back to the stuff that works, and I'm
Right.
okay with it in that regard. But when it comes to like just making it like cis white man is the hero protagonist all the time, it gets boring and it
Mhm.
reflects that there's just this regression of
Yeah,
the industry. And it's just you're not giving
absolutely.
everybody like there was talk of doing a black Superman that for a while.
Mhm.
There is a black Superman in the DC universe. Why not?
Of course.
Like, why not? Like,
Why not?
why not?
Mix
Yeah,
it up. I mean, that's the thing, as I wrote about in the book. If you are not pursuing that, like films that appeal to a wide array of audiences, you are leaving money on the table. And
yeah,
regardless of how you feel about, just inclusion and equality and all that kind of stuff and equity, you are. It's been proven that if you cater to, again, all audiences, but like, not just Asian people went to see Crazy Rich Asians. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
not like that. There's such a hunger for, I think, things that do just take you by surprise. They're so wild and interesting, and just a point of view that you maybe hadn't seen before. If you've, and that's what's always so funny to me is when you get the sort of some, mm, you know, the people who call themselves or see themselves as a super fans. Well, I'm a Superman super fan, and you have to do it this way, or I'm a James Bond super fan, and you have to. No one has to do anything. No
No,
one. They're all money making enterprises, and there's a lot of ways to make money. Um,
I would say
it's
don't do
really,
Superman as an Ayn Rand archetype. I would say don't do that. But in
yeah,
any other
don't.
case,
Yeah, it's very
ugh.
strange
Can
the
you tell I don't like
conversation.
Ayn Rand?
Yeah, I don't.
I
Same.
feel like
I
that's the
don't.
big problem is that the philosophy of the business at this point, at least from my perspective, from the 16 years I was in the business, it's the Ayn Rand philosophy of "fuck you, I got mine." It
Yes,
feels
and
like it boils,
yes,
especially below the line, because
yes,
somebody who I used to work with, and I love her to death, but she always had this feeling that it's a very competitive business. Like there's competitive, and then there's bloodthirsty.
yes,
Like I've always
and
felt that below the line, you have to be as bloodthirsty and hungry as possible to work your way up the chain, kick people out of the way, fuck over anybody that doesn't do exactly what you want, and it just my brain doesn't work like that. I'm not a bully.
it
I don't
doesn't.
treat people like shit. I can't do that. If I was going to be stuck
And
as a
I
third
honestly,
for my life,
but
fine.
so I think a lot of people believe what you just said about having to be brutal and bloodthirsty and all of that. The thing about it is, I think that can work, but it stops working over time. And I actually think that is like saying, well, I have all these seeds in my house. I'm going to make a stew with all of my seeds for next year. Yeah, you will be fed maybe for 2 or 3 days. Then you won't have anything down the line. What I see happening, I first met some of the people who I still write about now or still know now in the industry 15, 20, 25, in some cases 30 years ago. And I can tell you that that's not true. And sometimes I think about it as like the fifth bedroom conundrum. Okay, so you could act like a complete piece of shit and treat people like garbage and use them as stepping stones for your own ambition. So maybe you end up with a 5 bedroom house or a 4 bedroom house in a nice part
Yeah,
of town. Here's the thing, if you had just been a human being, maybe it's taking a risk to do that. It's also taking a risk to be a giant piece of shit because that might come back and bite you in the ass in a way that you don't expect. But
yeah,
more notably, what I've seen, the people who don't go down that road of like I've got to be brutal and just have my elbows out at all times and be grasping and shit on other people when I have to. The people who don't do that, they might have like a 2 bedroom condo. They still have a place to live.
yeah,
Like they're not dying. I just firmly and wholeheartedly do not accept that rationale. It's like, well, I'm only like this because I have to be. You don't have to be anything.
yeah,
You're choosing that. And if there's a thing, Jesse, you've hit upon one of the core glitches of my brain. What I really hate, I really, really hate, is when someone takes something that is a choice that they made and portrays it as inevitability.
yeah,
No, that was not an inevitability that you needed to make up a false rumor about someone else's work history. It was not an inevitability that you needed to harass or verbally castigate that person in front of the whole crew. It was not an inevitability that you needed to um, sit talk somebody else to this producer so that you could get a job with them down the road, and that other competitor that you see as a competitor couldn't get a job. Like you, those are all decisions that someone is making. No one's making them do anything. Do not paint that to me as a situation where you had no autonomy. You did have autonomy. You chose to do shitty stuff. That's not, well, I had to because it's dog eat dog. No, you're making it dog eat dog. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be that way. I know plenty of people who have a roof over their head and are not starving in the streets who didn't act that way. And by
Yeah.
the way, some of those people were subjected to abuse like that and made a very conscious decision to not act that way. And please do not portray them as also just unable to, they if other people can be through a shit work environment and can go through that and choose not to propagate and enable those norms, that is also a choice. And
Yeah.
don't downplay that choice
Hmm.
as if it's nothing. It's not nothing. And I think a lot of people have gone that, because at the end of the day, you have to be able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Do you want to, are you, oh, well, I have to make my film because my film is going to be such an incredible illumination and exploration of the human condition. Right. In the pursuit of that, if you destroy actual human beings, fuck your film.
Yeah.
Fuck
It's
your
in
show.
service of nothing. It's in
It's in
service of
service of nothing
hypocrisy.
except your ego, and you could, if nothing else, just be honest about that.
Yeah. That brings up the thing that the point where I knew I needed to get out of the business. It was 2021. I worked on a pilot called The Spook Who Sat by the Doorstep. It was a TV. It was supposed to be a TV series and didn't get picked up. It was a there was a movie made back in the 70s based on the book of the same name. It's about, I believe, the first black man that's hired to be a an operative for the CIA. Um, the pilot was a production over the course of 2.5 weeks. We shot in Baltimore and the DC area. It was a fucking disaster. It was like every day was minimum 13 hours, 12 hours for
Wow.
shooting, 1 hour lunch break. And it was either pouring down rain or it was blazing hot. And
Mm.
it was cicada
Ouch.
season. It was
Wow.
wonderful. And the key grip we had on this, I'm gonna call him out in his name because he's a fucking asshole. Eddie Homan, giant piece of shit. He's been in the business for like 30 years. He worked on the fucking Wire. He worked, I think, a little bit on Homicide, Life on the Street. Uh, an enormous bully, absolute punk piece of shit. And we were doing the best we could. The grip, I was on the grip crew for this set grip, and we were doing the best we could trying to work under these strenuous conditions, long hours,
Mhm.
brutal work environment. It was hot, it was raining, and he would verbally abuse us on the radio. He would treat us like complete crap. He specifically targeted me. He just doesn't like me on a personal level. And it's like, well, like I would drive home after work at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I pull over the side of the road and I'd start breaking down. I'd start losing it.
Oh
Like
God.
like this
I'm so
guy, and yeah,
sorry.
I addressed this to the union, and I said, "Hey, this is not okay." And they just said, "Well, he's been in the business a long time. It was a tough environment. You just kind of have to deal with it. You know, it's just the way it is." Like, why am
It's
I
just
paying
the
into a
way it is.
union where you
Right.
guys are not going to do a goddamn thing?
That's
What is the
just the
point?
way. That's just the way he is. That's just the way it is. That's just the way she is. I,
That's
man,
why I started putting a crowbar in the trunk of my car. If any motherfucker would try to fuck with me again, fuck it. Jail time sounds good.
yeah.
God.
No, it's incredibly. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Unfortunately, that has been enshrined as the person who gets things done
Yeah.
in this industry, and I just think, right, at what cost?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I actually don't think that under these brutal conditions, are you going to work faster now? I actually,
Oh, it
like,
went
again,
slower. It went way slower.
morally and ethically, people shouldn't act this way. Let me just preface that. But
Yeah.
even beyond that, a thing I like to trot out a lot is, okay, if you have an ongoing TV series, go to the IMDb page. Any executive who tells you they don't know if there's a problem show is full of shit.
Yeah.
Because especially when you had longer seasons or longer runs for TV shows, if you go on the IMDb page and there's multiple names listed for the DP, there's multiple names like people don't fucking last on this show.
Yeah.
And the studio did, we had no, I'm like, you're so full of shit. Every covering executive knew exactly what was going on. And I think again, just from an efficiency point of view, nobody works faster when they're being traumatized. I mean, you can even go into science about this. There are studies about it. How does the human brain work when it's dealing with trauma, abuse, and PTSD? Not well.
No, not
It's
well.
not something that helps. But yeah, that's why a thing I like to say a lot, sort of analogy. I just read this incredibly devastating, horrific story about uh, the allegations against Brian Jordan Alvarez, the guy who created a show called English Teacher.
Oh,
And
I just read that today that you posted it. Yeah, I just saw that.
yeah, it was
That was a
horrifying.
lot.
It was a lot, and it was horrifying, and it was just um, what in the world, like dehumanizing people
Yeah.
and just not treating others as human beings is not normal. And in response to when I put some thoughts about it on Blue Sky, and a person who was in the industry talked about her experience shooting a commercial where an actor was rewarded for making a brave choice by running off set, running back on set to do a take where he was completely nude and putting his genitals in her face, which was not at all in the script.
What the fuck?
And the director just was like, everyone give this person a hand for their brave choice. Imagine you're just shooting a commercial and someone is like doing that. It's like, no, in what other industry, if I walk into a grocery store, the district manager is not going to be reading the, you know, manager of that store the riot act because he didn't run out into the produce area and, whip his junk out.
Yeah.
Why aren't you making brave choices? Like, and what people are like, why do you write about Hollywood? Because people go into it with this level of enthusiasm and love and desire to work hard. And what they get is an industry in which boundary violations, exploitation, and abuse and exploitation of various kinds are the norm.
Yeah.
That's not the norm at the grocery chain down the street. The guy who's stocking the produce doesn't need to verbally abuse me to sell me some apples. You know what I mean? But the
Yeah.
expectation in Hollywood is that that's creativity, that's someone with a thick skin, that's leadership, that's how it works. The
Yeah.
norms are so fucked, and I just honestly sometimes I sit there and think, Jesse, I I don't know that my book is anything more than a drop in the bucket. I really part of the reason I wrote it was because
Oh,
I
you
wanted
didn't
to
even
help
touch
people
on
like
House of
you.
Cards. You didn't even touch on that.
Well, I
I
wanted
got
to tell
stories.
people like you, if you think this is wrong, I'm validating you. If you want to tell House of Cards stories, go nuts.
I only worked on the first, a little bit of the first season. But when the show was first being produced, it was considered first season television, and it was the beginning of the streaming era. So
Yeah, yeah, that was their
rates on that
big.
show were
Yeah,
dead low, like super,
right.
like
Oh,
22, 23 an
oh
hour.
yeah, the streamers decided to change the game by being more exploitative, according to a lot of people I've talked to. So that
Yeah,
was the
once you
time
take
when
out
they changed
taxes, it's like
the
slave
paradigm.
wages. It's awful.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, but, first
Jeez.
season and also Fincher was heavily involved in the first season, and I watched the first episode, I was like, "Eh, it's not for me." It's not my kinda show. But
Mhm.
yeah, Fincher would do, like, 30, 40, 50, 60 takes of, like, somebody picking up a wine glass, and it's like, you can't do that in
You just
television.
don't understand his process.
Oh, fuck that.
No, I'm
You know,
kidding. I'm kidding. I'm not justifying this man at
No,
all.
I'm a
Yeah.
little. I've grown tired of filmmakers that are like, I have to do like 60 takes because I need to get the perfect shot. Like, you don't have time, we don't have the money, and I've grown tired of, like, I've also stopped watching like Stanley Kubrick movies because that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I just don't. Yeah,
I will say that this is a statement that applies to many situations, many situations. You know, what we've done, what I've done, what many other reporters have done in the last decade in terms of covering Hollywood misconduct, abuse, assault, and the worst, again, the just terrible, like just unforgivable behavior. The amount of enabling and cover ups and payoffs and NDAs and simply knowledge.
Yeah.
Knowledge. I mean, there's been a number of situations where people were like, I had to go to a company or a studio or whoever it was, or a person or their reps. Oh, we had no idea. Oh, you had no idea about this thing that was going on for years. You had no idea at all. Even as you took that person and transferred them from production to production, literally people were telling me, I wish I didn't have as many memories in my brain of people using that, moving the abusive priest from parish to parish analogy. That shit still goes on.
Or dirty
Still goes
cops getting
on.
transferred from department to department.
Exactly. And what I sit there and say is, yeah, all of the people who like, just take Sleepy Hollow. Take sleep just the
Oh, you have a
chapter that
whole
might
chapter
focus on
on that.
Sleepy
Yeah. I never
Hollow.
watched the show, but
What
I've
we've
heard it was
got
good.
there is racism,
Hmm?
sexism, misogynoir, every single kind of like shit show that can go on behind the scenes goes on, right?
Yeah.
And everyone, yeah, do I have a list in my brain of people who knew exactly what was going on and exactly what was being purposefully said about one of the stars of that show to the media? Do I have a list in my head of people who I think knew that that was going on or even made that happen? Yeah, I do. I have a list of my names in my head. Almost all of the names on the list in my head of possible people who either knew or put that in motion are more powerful than they were then. More powerful, not less.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people have skated through. And what I feel like my thing about, I don't know a lot about other industries, but I will say this about Hollywood: eternal vigilance.
Yeah.
Eternal vigilance. Because backsliding is just such a real thing in the arenas that we were talking about before, but also we may have created temporary sort of consequences for a few people. There have been no consequences, except in some cases promotions, for
Yeah.
people who either knew terrible things, enabled terrible things, or themselves did terrible things.
Yeah. Spacey didn't get fired from that show until somebody outside the production finally called him out. Then everybody's like, "Oh yeah, oh yeah, there was these other things we heard about behind the scenes." Like, come on.
Come on.
It's like,
Are
Jesus
you kidding?
Christ, guys. And the one
Like,
that I didn't realize was the Damon Lindelof stuff. I know you know Lindelof as pretty well. I mean, I never watched Lost. I wasn't. It was never really my thing. I heard it was like Twin Peaks, but nowhere near as good. So I was like, I'll pass. I like Twin Peaks. I like Twin Peaks a lot, but I don't want the second tier version of it. Um, but yeah, when all the accusations of the racism and all the backroom talk on that show, and I was just like, seriously? And then he goes and does the Watchmen show, which is about racism and gender and sexuality, and it's like, while I have issues with the show, especially the last two episodes where they shoved Dr. Manhattan back in the show for some fucking reason, it's like overall it was a phenomenal show. And now to know all that was happening is like, oh, it all feels performative. It all feels fake. I can't watch the show again because it just all feels like a bunch of bullshit. You know?
welcome to my brain. I don't know.
Uh,
That's a tough one for me. I mean, I guess my feeling is this: um, consequences for people, whether they were in my book or had some other kind of reporting about a project they were involved in, or their conduct, or what they allowed, or what they enabled, whatever. Consequences are usually transitory at best, if there are any.
yeah.
So my feeling about anyone in that realm where they just, people are like, I was canceled, and I'm like, you still are getting major deals and contracts, so okay, whatever you say, man.
And if they're not working
um
anymore, they're definitely getting residuals. Like my second note here, why isn't Brian Singer in jail?
oh, that's been the that's been the song I've been singing for many people, for been singing for years. No,
And
I
Roland
don't know.
Emmerich as well, because he and Roland Emmerich, they're both gay. They would both have gross sex parties at their houses. It's like, why is one of these guys still working? The other one has just disappeared off the planet. But Singer still gets residuals from all the X-Men movies.
Oh, not to mention the TV show, I believe
Oh,
House. I
House.
think
Oh, yeah,
his
House. He's
name
still
is on
that
every
was
episode of that show, which ran for a million years.
he doesn't have to work ever again. But it's like, why is this guy not in jail? Any other industry, these
Because
people would be behind bars immediately.
I got to tell you, Jesse, and this even was true before Me Too. I cannot tell you the number of times I have been listening to someone reporting on things that happened or they were made to endure on set or at work or in a production office or at a studio or whatever it was, and I'm like, do laws exist? Am I
Yeah,
am I in reality? Like, this is the thing. If you look at any amount of Hollywood history, um, you can go back quite literally 100 years, 90 years, 80 years, 70 years. You can go back, and the things we're talking about were still happening then, even more out of sight. And if you don't think that the network of fixers and cover up endeavors and NDAs and all of that shit, it's just, yeah, it's going to be different from somebody who had a massive scandal in the 50s, but it's essentially the same moves.
yeah,
Discredit the victim, give a narrative to a well chosen publication about the reform of the person who allegedly did the bad thing, or just simply wait it out, pay people off, get some NDAs on the books. It's just this stuff is really very. It was interesting to be someone who was on the front lines of reporting on Me Too, end of 2017, going into 2018, 19, and beyond, because I think it was very painful, but at the same time, it destabilized the industry for a hot minute. Nobody knew where it was going to fall next, and there was not a pat routine. Now I know what the pat routine is.
yeah,
If I reach out to somebody's reps, let's say I have heard about XYZ, so I do my due diligence, do as much reporting as I can, then I send a set of questions to, Jane Smith. Jane Smith, I would like to set up an interview with you. These are the questions I'm going to ask. I mean, the thing is, a lot of times I just send the questions now because I know if I just ask for an interview and then I ask those questions, they'll just hang up immediately.
yeah,
So, anyway, but now what happens when I reach out to someone like that for an interview? They call their agents at one of the big agencies. Those agents now have a roster of litigators that makes many, many, many dollars per hour. And that litigator and that team gets to work. They call in a crisis PR counselor or some kind of PR spin doctor most of the time, and they all hobnob and get together. And so I'll have sent over a list of 45 questions because I want to give people the most robust ability to respond to everything that I might include in the story or the book, everything. I don't want you to sit there and say, well, she didn't even bring that one up to me. That one I didn't see coming or whatever. I
mhm,
want you to have a chance to respond. Uh, Now the routine is very, very honed.
yeah,
And so they hire all these people, and it took me a while to figure it out. But the real point of what these people do is slow down the progress of the story, stop the story from being published, make a lot of threats to everybody at the publication or the publishing house, make a lot of threats variously to a number of people, all off the record. So on the record, that person's reps don't seem like absolute dicks. But generally, what I'm withstanding, or other reporters are withstanding for months, is just a stream of invective and
yeah.
bullying and just all kinds of shenanigans.
This
So,
doesn't sound like a PR team. It sounds like mafia goons.
I mean, yeah, I'm not going to contest that analogy at all. And I mean, but look at what has happened with the strikes.
Yeah,
These are entities that will band together to uh, essentially say to everyone who actually makes the stuff that they are putting out, oh, it's a real nice industry you got there. It would be a real shame if you were all fired from it and homeless.
yeah.
You
I mean,
know,
that's what award shows were made
it's
for. The Oscars was
it's
originally a
it's
union busting
cartels.
measure. Yeah,
Exactly. That's the thing. I think they are absolutely brutal in pursuit of their goals. I do think individual executives, individual filmmakers, individual people want to make a change and have tried to make a change. But what the system generally wants is for um,
Obedient workers, conformity.
obedient workers, and that was the thing. Like, just to briefly touch on the strikes for a minute. I mean, on the one hand, I think that the graphic that went around in the early days of the Writers Guild strike was, the graphic was, here are what just 8 people in the industry are made last year. It was like 8 or 10 execs at the top places. You know, between them, they all made like $770 million in a single calendar recent year.
Jesus.
And so the ask for the Writers Guild and everything that it would cover for 3 years was like, I think, less than half of that. So it's like, not only must you be obedient and underpaid and undercompensated relative to your role in the project's success, and precariousness in the extreme, that's not enough. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, that wasn't enough. You need to get on your knees, and you need to tremble, and you need to just there's no amount of. And that's why, honestly, I was glad that both two unions struck, because it's like, yeah, okay, you're not going to reason with these people. You are not going to reason with the people who leaked to one of the trades. We are waiting for these people to be homeless by Thanksgiving, and
yeah.
then we'll deal with them. And I'm like, yeah, that's like saying to a rabid, starving dog that's coming after you, what if you didn't bite my leg? Like,
Yeah.
you're not going to reason with these people. You've got to engage in these solidarity on the other side, or you will be destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a couple of weeks back, we had the CEO of United Healthcare got gunned down by a guy, and the very next day, Aetna approved all of its claims. I'm not saying that the two are connected, but maybe.
I but honestly, it's interesting to me, to, again, as someone who's covered the entertainment industry for a long time and seen different strikes play out and different guild politics play out. I just think that what the difference between the Writers Guild strike in 2007, 2008, and this time around, there always have been a cadre of people at the guild who see themselves more as management, as
Yeah,
basically in bed with the studios, or in the same realm as the top studio executives in that mindset.
I suppose you kind of need those people to kind of be a
Right.
negotiator between the groups, but when you just think you're part of that group,
Yes. Like, so
that's
I
the problem.
think, really, what, by taking away a back end deal, by taking away all of these, like, what the guilds, any guild, what any guild is asking for is pennies. It's
Yeah,
pennies. It's not that much compared to what these studios are making. But again, the stupid private equity, Wall Street, Silicon Valley thinking is that number forever go up, and the pressures to produce profits are getting more and more ridiculous, and so it has to come on the back of workers, not on the back of CEOs. I mean, you would have thought that when that graphic went around social media, these 8 guys made nearly $800 million in one year, and then we're asking for so little of that. You would have thought the strike would be over in that. I mean, really, realistically, the strike was over in that moment, because I don't care where you are on the Hollywood food chain. What you see very clearly is they're crying poor mouth about their budgets and the bottom line, and we're losing money and we're servicing debt and whatever. Okay, you take a pay cut.
yeah.
If
Then
all
they
all
hop
of
into
these
their
folks,
Mercedes and go back
oh,
to their
by the
mansion in the
way,
Hollywood
were
Hills.
independently wealthy before, all of you take a pay cut and make 100 grand next year.
Yeah,
Look, that freed up $700 million for you. You could. The thing is, they can't have it both ways. They cannot make these robber barons salaries and then also say to the workers, well, there's just nothing left in the till for you. Well, there's nothing left in the till because you're all being overpaid. And by the way, how many scripts have you written?
yeah,
Did you light that scene? Were you serving the food at 2 in the morning? No, these people have nothing to do with the creative process, and they're making 30 or 40 or 50 or $100 million a year to essentially, I mean, at best they can be stewards of this stuff and get it out into the world. A lot of them are actively working against any of this stuff being any good and being paid handsomely for it. So I think there's much more solidarity in the face of uh, these, frankly, rapacious companies.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard for me to listen to executives complain about budgets and the fiscal year when they hop into a Bentley and drive to their mansion in the Hollywood Hills.
Well, exactly.
My maid's really
That's
pissing
what
me off today.
a
Jeez.
writer said in my book. So much development of new projects happens for nothing. The writer doesn't get a check for often months, if not a year or years into the process.
Yeah.
Oh, you want me to spend more time reworking that pitch, reworking that outline, reworking that script? Can you
Yeah.
pay me for this development?
Yeah.
No. But
Yeah.
that person who's telling you no, they're on staff. They have a monthly income that they can depend on. It's so nuts to me that most people don't realize that it's the precariousness in the industry is out of control.
Yeah.
People who used to work fairly regularly and were not asking to be millionaires, were just asking to have a food on the table and a roof over their head. Everyone I know in the industry, their income has taken a huge hit in recent years, and that has
Yeah.
just driven a lot of people out of the industry full stop.
Yeah. The median income in America right now is $79,000. Is that a lot of money over the course of 12 months in a year?
In Los Angeles, that puts you in the rent burden category for most.
Yep.
Like
It's not a
there's
lot.
a lot of what drives me crazy about people being like, well, oh, these whiny there's less talk in the public of people in Hollywood being whiny babies, but like, sometimes I'm a little reticent to talk about like, well, what does a grip earn? What does an assistant earn? Okay, well, here's how the assistant pay works. Maybe they're making $1,000 a week. That might
Mhm.
sound like a lot. How many weeks of the year are they working? Are they paid for holidays? Do they get health care? Do they get overtime? What are the costs of commuting to the studio every day? Having a car, living in Los Angeles or New York or DC or Vancouver or even Toronto. Those cities, the cost of living, the cost of rent has gone up, and most of the people in the industry that I know are not working every week of the year, except if they're in this sort of executive class or on staff at a studio somewhere. Um,
And if you're
People
unionized,
are
you're getting your health care through the union, you have to work X amount of hours per week to meet your hours, and then you can get qualified for MPI or COBRA or something
and
like that.
a lot of people are not making those numbers
Yeah.
anymore. A
I
lot.
didn't. I've paid my health insurance since 2013.
Yeah,
I've paid it myself because I
yeah.
wasn't getting enough work.
And that I think this is just what Hollywood really is just really a carbon copy of what's happening in society. All the risk is on the average person. All
Yeah.
the reward goes to the CEOs. And,
Mhm.
I think what happened on the streets of New York a few weeks ago, I think
It's
it's
finally boiling over. I think people are finally
well,
realizing they don't care. They really don't care.
I read an interesting article the other day, and I thought it's just about the general trends. People don't feel heard. You know what I mean? People just simply do not feel heard. And I think, as much as we're talking about that trend in Hollywood, people were massively, massively disincentivized from even speaking up. Now, if people spoke up, what were the chances that they would be heard without ruining their career? So, all the precarity that we've talked about, which I think is getting even worse, the idea of speaking up and risking the tiny scraps of a career that most people have is just, it's not that was a pivot I actually had to make in the writing of my book, which was, I was talking to a writer producer I've known for a long time, and she said, for me, it's no longer even necessarily about making it a safe and respectful workplace. I just want to have a workplace at all.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized I have to pivot more toward the economic precarity of this industry. And again, how that services the bottom line. To have a big churn of people who come in, get exploited, get burnt out, and bring in a new crop when those people leave. That is the business model, unfortunately, in many
Yeah.
cases.
The film industry, for some reason, it feels like a meat grinder. Like,
Yeah,
people
it's
go in one
100%
end, meat
that.
comes out the other, and it shouldn't be like that. It should be a place where you
It
should go and
should not.
I
Oh,
mean,
well, we
yes, it
couldn't make our film if we paid it. Well, then don't make your film. Here's the thing. If whatever business you're in, if your business depends on wage theft, then it's not a business, it's a pyramid scheme, it's a
yeah,
scam.
yes,
Oh, well, we
yes,
couldn't do it. We couldn't have an improv comedy theater if we paid people. Then guess what? You shouldn't have an improv comedy theater, because if you are taking money at the door, if you are making money at this enterprise, you're not paying the people who make the actual content anything at all, not even bus fare.
yeah,
That is wage theft, and no, you shouldn't do it. If you can't have a business model in which you treat people reasonably and fairly and pay them fairly. I mean, you were just talking about those 13-hour days. In what other industry is it normal to have a work week that is
yes,
90 hours, 80 hours a week? It's
yeah, and
not normal. And
yeah,
that's
and
the
there
baseline. The baseline for Hollywood is 60 hours a week. That's normal. And whereas I'm like, I can't think of anything I want to do 60 hours a week at all, except maybe sleep. I don't
yeah.
know.
I mean, there are some people I know that love just being on set. They just love being on set. It's like that's great. I'm happy for you,
Great.
but
If you
for
no,
the
my
average
my
person,
feeling is for the
you
average
know,
person, if you want to have a life, I mean, we like amongst crew, it breaks my heart how often people get hurt on set or even die on set, and that's why I had a whole
yeah,
section in my book about we
accidents
nobody
on
should
set.
die in
Yeah,
pursuit of a film or a TV show. Nobody, there's no reason for it. The only reason that people are dying, I mean, obviously there are freak accidents. Death can happen anywhere. I understand
yeah,
that. But the reason people die in numbers on sets, the reason those numbers are far higher than they should be is because these long work days, these long work weeks lead to mistakes, lead to exhaustion, lead to corners being cut, and all sorts of negative outcomes, including injury and death.
yeah. I mean, you go through a number of was it the last Resident Evil movie that Anderson did? Is the director responsible in some way in a court to be held accountable for that?
Um,
I feel
I'm
like
not
they
enough
should
of a
be at least
legal.
somewhat held accountable.
I think they should be. I mean, there was that the train accident that killed a crew member down in Georgia. Gosh, I'm blanking on her name
Sarah,
right now.
oh god, what was her
Sarah
name?
Jones.
Sarah
Sarah
Jones.
Jones.
Thank you. Yeah,
Um, and there have been other incidents, and I I guess the way I would answer that is, every horrible thing that happens on a set, we have to ascribe proportions of responsibility, and I think that there can be many different people who are implicated, and I would say, um, whether it's the studio, whether it's the director, whoever it is, people who are not given the time, the resources, the education, and the support to do the job right. Like if you're at the studio and you said, okay, you know what, I know that you thought you had another week of filming, we're going to cut that week.
yeah,
So then you're putting people in an impossible position. I frankly think that a studio should be blamed if then in that last frenetic week of shooting, a stunt person has multiple injuries because everyone was rushing to get this last bit of stuff in the can.
yeah,
I, I mean, I think frankly the responsibility should go as far as the profits go. Whoever is profiting off this film, whoever's going to get a promotion or a bonus based off this film doing well, okay, well, you don't get to just have that and then ignore the human cost and the human suffering and other things that go awry.
yeah,
But I think that that's just unfortunately how it goes down.
yeah. There was a story on I think it was Transformers 3. I know people that worked on that, and it was a massive mess. I was asked to work on it, but I was unfortunately unavailable. Um, Well, actually, I should say fortunately because it was a miserable shoot.
Yeah, maybe
Uh,
fortunately.
yeah, fortunately. But yeah, a lot of mistakes happened on the set because they were just rushing because Michael Bay doesn't like to sit and wait. That's why there was that car accident in DC.
Yep,
Somebody was there was a woman was injured on set and received permanent brain damage and received a
yep.
$4 million payout from the studio. It's like it costs more to
Yes.
make
Well,
mistakes.
they're playing the Vegas odds. They're gambling that the family of the person killed won't,
Yeah,
won't do anything, that there won't be illegal, like a lot of films now, a lot of productions shooting in Romania, shooting in South Africa. Netflix is ramping up a huge amount of production in South Korea where guild the guilds are non-entities in a lot of countries.
they
Like
can
a
bypass
guild
union laws.
don't they can bypass union laws, they can bypass all sorts of things. And it's interesting, yes, there are American accidents and deaths that occur on productions and on American soil.
Yeah,
I could be wrong about this, and I do like to back things up with stats, but it's my sense that more and more productions are moving further away from production centers like London and New York and LA because there's no regulation. Do you think that someone in a country where there's not a ton of film production, or basically all the regulation around film and TV is pretty much non-existent, are they going to piss off a huge producer like, Lucasfilm or Netflix or Disney? They're going to keep that stuff on the down low, right? Like
yeah.
they're not that the authorities are not going to step in. So I think that it's really unfortunate to me, but there was a story a while back, maybe a few stories about how Squid Game was made.
Hmm.
Like a day on that production, and just apparently in South Korean productions in general, a day is anything within a 24-hour period.
Yeah,
So people are like not going home, not sleeping, not eat. Like the
it's a
conditions
sweatshop.
under which
It's a
things
sweatshop.
are made. It's a sweatshop, and it's not lost on me that as this massive drive for number go up, profit go up, everything go up all the time, including executive salaries and bonuses, all these productions are being, made in places like, oh, well, we just really wanted to film in Montenegro, and we just really liked filming in
Bullshit.
Czechoslovakia.
It was cheaper and you could afford to do it.
It was cheaper, and nobody would snitch if stuff went wrong. And again, I'm not dissing those crews. I am not dissing the people making those projects there or taking that work at all. I'm just saying it's appalling to me that a lot of times Hollywood's response to a history of misconduct or a history of exploitation, injury, abuse of any kind is, well, let's just cover it up better.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. That was definitely the message we were hoping to send. Great
yeah.
job.
It reminds me of that movie They Live, the John Carpenter film They Live. Personal favorite of mine. In the list, I think in the last like 10 years, has been like this renowned, renewed love for it. They're like, oh my god, it's more relevant than ever. No, it's always
Yeah.
been relevant because nothing
It's
ever changes. There are
yeah.
always people in power. They take advantage of people without power. It's always been there. You
But
just
you
didn't
know what
know.
yeah, I mean, that's true. I do think that, but like I certainly can get into the spiral of everything sucks. I hate this industry. But what I can't fully go down that spiral to be totally negative all the time, because what I will say is this: when people come together, they have more power than they think, and the industry doesn't want people to know that. The industry at the higher echelons, put it that way.
Yeah, the
So
ones at the very, very top.
I as much as it's kind of like an abuser situation. They don't want you to think you have any allies. They don't want you to think you have any support or resources, or that you can do anything about your situation, right? Well, here's the thing. A lot of stories that I've done, the people who were my sources were all up and down the line, and occasionally executives help. Like there's been all sorts of people that have come through with assistance for the stories that I've done over a period of many years. But a lot of the people for some stories are assistants, junior writers, crew members helped tremendously on a story I did about a producer who had 3 shows on the air with CBS at one point, and this was uh, some of the productions from this guy were in Atlanta, and that's another classic case of let's move to a very anti-union state.
Yeah,
So
a
Marvel
right
has
to
a big
work state.
operation
Right
down
to work
there.
state.
There's a ton of different, but what I've seen is that when people come together and realize that they do have power together, because yeah, Hollywood's a very vindictive industry, and I've told people that. I'm always very upfront with people. If you're my only source, it's going to be difficult for you, and the publication is going to want you to have your name in the piece. I'm sorry, but that's how it is. Um, and here's how this that would be a difficult road, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. But when people come together, they have power. They have power, and a lot of times, what these different productions, studios, even sometimes people in the same guild aren't encouraged to talk, share information, and all that. But when people do overcome those barriers and they just speak the truth, they can just shake the gates of these studios right down to the ground. I've
Mhm.
seen it happen. I've I now have a very well developed spidey sense for when people being paid a lot of money have a lot of flop sweat, like just running down their face. I can hear it on the phone. If you have the facts on your side, if you have any documentation, if you have other people who can lend their voices to your voice, you're not powerless. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what they would love for you to believe, that you are powerless and nobody cares. I care. And I think a lot of what's happened in the last 8 to 10 years has been moving the conversation to, like, again, I don't know if my book did any good. I hope I but I hope, and what I've heard that it did for people was, if you thought that that thing that happened to you on that production, that what was it, a line producer who was screaming at you, and that guy who was horrible on that pilot, I wanted my book to say, if nothing else, what I can tell you is, I believe you, you're not alone. And I'm sorry that this is the way it is, but this is often, too often, the way it is. So I think that one way that abusive and exploitive practices thrive is in the shadows. We have dragged them into the light and we've said, this is really common, and you don't get to hide behind the bullshit of golly jeepers, we didn't know.
Yeah.
I don't care if you did or didn't know. You probably did. But now that you do know,
Do something
what will
about it.
you do about it?
Yeah. Yeah. That one of my other notes is on the Louis C.K. situation and how he's been
Oof.
slowly coming back into the into the light, and he's making jokes
Yeah.
about the
Oh,
accusations
he
against
won a
him.
Grammy. He won a Grammy
Yeah,
for.
like
Hmm.
it, there's a moment in, I want to say it in his show. I think it's season 3 or 4 of his show Louis, which I used to love. Now I can't watch it for obvious
Nope.
reasons.
Mm-mm.
Um, there's a moment when he says, "When someone says you hurt them, you don't get to decide that you didn't." And I was like, "Wow, that's totally hypocritical now."
Well, it's really interesting to me, that story about Brian Jordan Alvarez,
Hmm.
and oh, he had a show, a web series that was really popular, but oh, I'm just a messy person and I have a messy personal life. We've seen it with Louis C.K. And I actually read a really interesting New York Times article about, with some newer reporting on the Nobel Prize winning writer Alice Munro, who knew that her husband had molested her daughter and stayed with him.
Jesus.
I there's no amount of time I can spend on that set of facts that makes them make sense. But what's interesting to me about that piece that was written about this this horrible set of revelations was, she essentially used her daughter's story and her own struggle with all of this as content for her fiction, as grist for the mill.
Ugh.
And I think the unfortunate thing that Hollywood allows some people to do is reconceive who they are, and launder it to some degree. And that's what was so horrible. One of the many horrible things about the Louis C.K. thing is that not only did he use his series to, in some ways, as a confession, there were some issues to do with lack of consent in that show that really troubled me at the time.
First
Like
episode. Yeah, very first
at the
episode.
time, at the time, it was deeply troubling to me certain things that would happen, and then how they were resolved was sometimes even more troubling. And the unfortunate fact is sometimes fiction, film, television, plays, uh, all of it, short stories. I think people are using that work to rationalize who they've been and to make it seem more palatable.
Yeah.
And that's really awful to contemplate, um, because, I've devoted my adult life to, analyzing or critiquing or reporting on productions of various kinds, and how they were made and why they were made and thinking about why they had that impact. The unfortunate reality is that some people are using those creative arenas to tell a more palatable fiction about what they're about and
Hmm.
what they've done.
Yeah.
And that's that's not the kind of catharsis I would like to think that we're, like
Yeah.
fostering, but unfortunately, yeah, I don't know. But so and then it was double disappointing with Louis C.K. because it's like, okay, well, your whole persona was this really flawed guy, but with had some good impulses, just trying to figure it out. You could keep doing that. Be Take what we thought was this relentless but funny, brutal honesty, and actually use be brutally honest, but in that funny way to dissect or tell a new set of stories about why you thought you could do that and you should do that and why you think you got away with it and what you're doing differently now. Like actually be that guy that we thought you were, and then he pivots to, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I'm just going to do a lot of sold out comedy tours and do a lot of self pity and make light of it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so I guess that's who you were the whole time.
Yeah.
And that's just, I, I want to say the word disappointing, but that doesn't really cover it. But here we are.
Yeah. I mean, for lack of a better word, disappointing. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was also going through my notes right here. Monica Owasu Breen, who, by the way, works on Dune. She works on the Dune Prophecy, by the way. She's one of the writers on that show. Her being fired, and she was being fired because of the racism elements being completely cut out of the writing process on Sleepy Hollow. It's like just the disappointment of the business, just not getting it. Like what? How do you
Yeah.
have this many shitty people in one place at one time? How is
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
possible?
Monica was on Lost, and I just,
Oh, was it Lost? I'm sorry. I
yeah, it was
apologize. I'm
Lost.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
sorry.
she, again, a heroic person who I'm lucky to know. She really, um, she was one of the many people who we sat there and were like, we both thought that Watchmen was good. We're not
Yeah.
like sitting. The goal was not like, oh gosh, the goal with my book and was not to say, oh, this writer's a bad writer or this writer's a bad whatever. I'm like, but
Call them
see,
out for their behavior. That's what you wanted to do.
yeah, just like let's be real about what really happened. And it's amazing to me that a lot of people in Hollywood want to say the following: I'm one of the good ones. They all want to pat themselves on the back. Maybe I'm one of those people too. I don't know. But you don't get to determine whether you're one of the good ones. You don't get to be the arbiter of that. That happens if people just legitimately think you're one of the good ones or a good person or a good collaborator or a good boss or whatever it is, because that's how you acted. And what I really wanted to do with that Lost chapter is say, these guys were able to step into this place of using their power, I believe, an awful and damaging way over a period of years, because that's what was expected and there was nothing standing in their way. And, you know, the violence, I mean, I'm just going to say it, the violence of the experience for anyone in this industry can be extreme. Anyone
Yeah.
of any identity. But the violence and constant dread or fear or um, horrors faced by people who are uh, black, gay. I mean, oh my God, the stuff around, it's strange. There are obviously a number of very high profile queer creators, but like there are some people in the industry who are queer, and the horror stories they've told me are just mind boggling.
I just
How I
realized
would like to,
something. I just realized something.
yeah,
So when I was on that pilot, it was June of 2021. That's Pride Month. I
yeah,
announced to everybody on social media that I'm actually bisexual.
right.
It wasn't
Me
until
too.
after that my boss got really shitty with me. So I think that
Wow.
does that qualify as a hate crime?
I think that there's probably
Oh,
a link
fuck
there
that
of some
guy.
sort. Fuck that guy. Yeah, fuck that
God,
guy a
fuck that
lot.
guy.
Yeah, no. Well, that's what's so wild to me, and that's like honestly, we talked like earlier about like people using our. I had enthusiasm too, but then you come to find that like, wait, this industry that portrays itself as tolerant, um,
Liberal. Yes.
liberal, or like welcoming,
Nope. It's lies.
accepting, all of that. It's so not like that. It's so
Yeah.
not like that. Like, we're seeing it happen right now with this contraction in the industry.
Yeah.
The people who came in the door last are being shoved out the door first.
Yep.
And a lot of these people barely had a toehold to begin with.
Yeah.
So the people who are vulnerable, like we're seeing it now with Pixar yet again coming out with this
Oh,
weak ass bullshit about trans representation. Are you telling me that 30 seconds in one project is going to destroy? They're just so. I think
I
again, this
think they
goes
cut
back to
that.
my
I think
brain
I, I
glitch.
think they cut it from the film. I
They
think they
cut
cut it.
it. They cut it, and it's like, can we just be honest about what's happening here?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we find that people want to have that conversation with their children on their own time. Great, that's cool. If I don't take my kid to the theater to see the movie, then I don't have to have it. Like, people are already in control of their movie going experience. A lot of times I just want a press release that's honest.
Yeah.
We don't care about queer and trans people as much as we care about money. The end. We
Yeah.
don't care. Please
Which makes
stop
no
saying you
sense.
care.
Which
You
makes no
don't
sense.
care. But they want to release their film everywhere in the world. They've already made cuts to their films based on whatever market they're in. They take out like it it still boggles my brain that uh, Marvel wanted a pat on the back for having a gay character in Avengers Endgame in a like one of those like a focus group, not a focus group, but like a recovery group.
Recovery
A
group,
guy, right? A guy
and
referring
it's
to his
one of the
husband, and I'm like,
directors. It's one of the
right? And
it's
I'm
the
like,
director of the movie.
wow, okay. So like they want people to accept these scraps, aren't we? So like as you said, it took them how many films before they had a female protagonist? How many films, how many series did Lucasfilm is honestly, when it comes to this stuff, they've been very smart about who they cast in their projects, who is in charge of them behind the scenes.
Hmm.
They've had one series, one, where the creative lead was a woman that was the acolyte. It got one season and then it's done. So
Yeah.
like it's the most like just please I actually I've written a terrible version of this, and I might maybe I'll send it to you on the I'll email it to you or something. I've thought about posting it sometimes, but it's so cynical, and it's like, here is the honest press release. I wouldn't want to get this from a studio, a major studio, but I
The career
just saying,
suicide
look,
letter.
we tried to pretend that we cared about queer people, people who aren't white, anyone with a disability. We tried to pretend we cared about this stuff for a hot minute. It was exhausting. We don't care.
Yeah.
P.S. We've never cared. What we
Hmm.
care about is make the bosses look good, make sure they get paid a lot, make sure the studio makes money. The end. We've never
Yeah.
cared about anything else. And all of the PR statements we put out asserting that we cared about the quality of life and the workplace safety of do we care about respectful workplaces? No. Do we care about whether the people making our stuff get paid well and are treated respectfully and just with common sense decency? I mean, we'll take it if it happens. Are we going to enforce it at all times? No. Um, like again, the reason I've never posted that is because I do know good people in the industry at every level who do care and don't want to be shitlords, right? But
Yeah.
like again, the thing with this industry is constant vigilance is required because a lot of people would like to completely just go even more hog wild with let's all be bullies because that's more fun and or let's all exploit everyone else so that the people at the top can make a ton. Those are the pillars that or that's sort of like the gravitational forces that are always dragging the industry back to its bad old habits. But um you know, I guess if they want to keep doing that, that's just grift for the five remaining reporters who do real reporting on the
Yeah.
industry.
Well, it's also telling that because of like you start out in your book with the Trump administration entering into the office in 2016. That's when things started getting really shitty. Like a lot of the abuse started to really come out. Me Too happened not too long
Mhm.
after that.
Yeah.
And now we have Trump going back into office. Just
Yeah.
oh fuck my goddamn life. How the hell did this happen? But it's like it's like
Yep.
I described
And
it as
that's why ABC News caved.
yeah, yeah. It's
They
like
folded
like
like a
the
tube of
assholes are in
soup,
power again. It's like we gotta
and
just conform.
they are giving uh they're giving $15 million in a First Amendment suit. They just caved on it on a legal matter where they absolutely would have won.
Yeah, yeah. Because
And I'm
they
like,
yeah.
oh, cool, because you know what? Disney does not want to piss off the new administration, so that's the world we're living in.
Mhm.
Disney is in charge of Pixar, which removed a tiny blip of really, really necessary and underseen trans, a scene with a trans character that's barely a blip. They
Yeah.
removed it. They caved on the First Amendment, and they're like, I don't see a world in which the next few years we don't see a lot of examples of that, unfortunately.
Yeah. There'll be a lot of I guess you could say like a lot of whitewashing happening in a lot of films, a
Hmm.
lot of that, less representation of LGBTQ individuals.
Or I hope I'm wrong, but realistically, top level corporate lawyers are telling these big multinationals, you don't want to piss off this administration.
Yeah.
So here's how to avoid doing that. And so, yeah, there's going to be a ton of backsliding, a ton, and I'm not looking forward to it. And I hope I'm wrong. I really do.
Yeah. It's it's really telling when when the behavior of of the mainstream film industry is worse than the like adult side of the industry. Like I have several friends
Yeah.
that work both in front of and behind the camera on the adult side of the industry, and they say that people are treated fairly well over there. There's shitty parts of it, but people are
Yeah.
treated fairly well. Like in recent years, there's been what's it called? Intimacy coordinators that have been put on set
Hmm.
for like sex scenes, love scenes, whatever it may be. Uh, there's been several mainstream actors that don't like that. Like they're of the older generation. Like they think, oh, it's inappropriate to have that. Whereas in the adult side of the industry, there's various actresses and actors that are like, yeah, we kind of needed that on set in case things get out of hand.
Yes.
They understand it. Why can't the mainstream side just get its shit together? Why is it so difficult?
Yeah, again, because they will do anything and get into business with anyone that they think will make them money.
Yeah,
And that being said, without a doubt, they also are very hyper aware of bad press.
yeah,
So it's not as if everything I'm saying is totally hopeless because at the highest levels, people are aware executives can get fired, executives can get shoved out, and studios can be made to look very bad by, you know, reviving Scott Rudin's career, just to bring the conversation full circle. So far, that hasn't happened. Will it happen? I sure to shit hope not. I don't think that Wes Anderson needs Scott Rudin to make a movie. He's already proved multiple times he doesn't need this guy. Nobody
Yeah.
needs this guy anywhere. So it'll be interesting to see. I do think that they're much more aware of the negative reputational damage, even damage to a stock price or an executive pay package or whatever. There are negative outcomes. And, frankly, look at the strike. When IATSE went up for renewal of their contract, they didn't strike. I do think that the SAG and WGA strike last summer, I really wondered if that would cause, would they keep, doing the same stepping on rakes with other guilds? So far, I haven't seen it, but I do think they completely misread the room. They misread everything, and those executives, not that they'll face any monetary consequence for it, but like they mishandled the strikes completely. There didn't need to be any strikes at
Yeah.
all. They brought that on themselves. They ended up with nothing in the cupboard and nothing to show their customers, and that was an own goal that they could have avoided. So, you know, there just has to be a lot of energy around uh, keeping these companies from backsliding and supporting efforts to keep them at least somewhat non-exploitational, somewhat non-biased. It's an eternal struggle. It's not going to be over anytime soon.
Yeah. If it ever ends. Like you were saying, the
Not
constant
never.
vigilance, it
Yeah.
never ends. Like, it's a never-ending
Never
battle,
ends.
it's a never-ending war.
Nope. Nope.
I'm out of it personally. I just couldn't do it anymore. It's like I just
Yep.
got tired. I mean, I when turned in my card, my union still said, "You need to pay your third quarter dues." I was like,
Okay,
"Why?
cool.
Why?" Well, in
No.
case you have to be in good standing in case you want to come back. So I basically paid them an extra
No.
$68 to fuck off. It's like
Yeah.
just to tell them to fuck off. Like, don't contact me again. Okay. It's like I just and by the way, of all the people I know and I still communicate with on social media, like that work in the business, still involved in the business, when I announced that I was leaving, only two people directly contacted me.
Wow.
Two. Everybody else is kind of like, all right, fine, whatever. My
Well, I
buddy
think
Jason in Philadelphia and my friend Margaret in New York. Everybody else is kind of like, whatever. No reaction, no
whatever.
response, nothing.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people, a thing I run into a lot, and this is certainly, again, a thing I've not, this is still a work in progress. People who are subjected to abusive norms but are given to understand that these norms are normal, you have to do a lot of unpacking yourself in terms
Hmm.
of, um, you know, understanding how that propaganda was implanted in your brain, how it
Yeah.
took root, and how painful it is to see that it was wrong. I think for a lot of people, the easier route is just, well, it is what it is. Just
Yeah.
accept it.
Yeah.
And then what those people are doing overtly or covertly or subconsciously or whatever is propagating it.
Yeah. Buying into it, like, well, this is how we've always done things. Well, that doesn't make it
Well,
right.
we can't change this at all. No, people have changed things.
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, I can't sit there and tell you what the end result of my career has been. I know that specific people have told me, you removed the abuser from my situation, and that changed my work situation and my mental health and my life.
That's a win. That's a win
So
right
that's
there.
so you can things can change. And sometimes I've told people, I'm like, look, you need to get to a safe place. You need to ride out that job, get the last check, and then not every situation is going to be one where people feel safe going to the press, doing this, doing that, going to whatever, you know, using whatever resources are out there. Sometimes you just got to suck it up and get out of the job, and so you can get that last check and go home and pay rent and then never talk to
Yeah.
those people again. But you know I don't know. I think that there's been a realization on the part of some people, at least, that even if we're not marching up to the director's chair and reading that dude the riot act, or just getting in the face of anyone who hired that shitty producer who was screaming at everyone, amongst friend groups, amongst peer groups, amongst maybe the group, at least there can be the recognition, this is wrong, and I don't endorse this, and this guy's a dick. This guy's an asshole, and you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, hopefully people can get at least some of the support that they need from their peers. It costs somebody nothing to say, yeah, there's no way that this person screaming at you on set the way that they did was appropriate. I mean, maybe it's a small thing, but I talked to Leslie Linka Glatter, who I've known for a long time. She's directed a lot of cool stuff, and she said, generally speaking, when she has to have words with someone about their conduct on set, she does it out of sight.
As you're supposed
She
to.
pulls someone aside. The people who berate someone in front of their peers, in front of a crew, and even in a social setting or whatever,
It's uncalled
what
for. There's no reason for it.
right? Even if the person fucked up, there's a way to turn that into, hey, you know what? If you could do it this way this time, it'll save us some time. We can all go home earlier. Like, there's a
Yeah.
way to just get the person on board and be like, oh yeah, no, thanks for letting me know. Good. And then there's a way to just make that person feel like dog shit.
Yeah.
And then the person who calls people out publicly, a lot of times I feel like what they're doing is making sure everybody knows that they have the power to demoralize the whole crew whenever they feel like it.
Yeah. It's power play. Yeah.
It's a power play. And a lot of people, here's the thing, Jesse, I don't need to tell you this. Some people in this industry are just pure and simple sadistic people. I don't care
Michael
what
Bay.
people get off
Michael
in
Bay
their
can confirm right now. Michael Bay.
I don't care what people get off on in their personal lives if everyone is consenting enthusiastically the whole time. I genuinely don't give a shit.
Yeah.
But if you are a sadist, a lot of sadists in this industry get off on other people being in discomfort, being humiliated, without consent, without any norms of decency at all.
Yeah.
And they get off on that. And the industry provides them with a lot of powerless targets that churn in and out all the time. It's a new crop every film. And yeah, the studios that endorse that shit and keep handing those people checks, at least be honest with yourselves about what it is you're doing.
Yeah.
You're engendering, you are enabling, and creating opportunities for abuse.
Yeah.
The end.
Yeah. Speaking of Michael Bay and getting off, you know how Michael Bay cast Megan Fox in the first Transformers movie?
Oh, I don't think I'm gonna like this story. How?
He had her come over to his house and wash his car, and he videotaped it.
I think I've read that somewhere. Yeah, that sounds about right.
And she's playing a
Yeah.
17-year-old in the movie.
hmm Yeah, I mean,
Yep.
this is an industry in which,
How did he get through the Me Too movement and did not get in any way hit by that? How?
because the studios want to make money with him. The end.
Because
It
Transformers 4
always
made a
comes,
bazillion dollars.
well, it always, exactly. And it's not just money. I always think of it as
Prestige. It looks good
the
to
more
them.
factor, the more factor. What is it that the people with power want more of?
More.
Money, promotions, access to the coolest parties, awards,
Hmm.
um, checks, like whatever the people with decision making power want more of, does being in business with that person get them more of that?
Yeah.
Then it does not matter. My least favorite thing in the world is the number of awards for altruistic charity and bullshit like that people in Hollywood give each other.
They're
I
tax
would
write off. That's all it is.
love, well, not just the acting awards. I mean, sometimes people who win a produce like a best director or best actor, they did really great work. I'm not
Yeah.
hating on the concept of people getting recognized for good work, but like you see all these like, oh, we're having a luncheon for women in Hollywood, or we're having a luncheon for who did the most altruistic philanthropy and blah. I'm like, they love to blow smoke up each other's asses about how philanthropic and great they are. And I'm like,
Yeah.
You've got to be kidding me. You're the
Yeah,
people hiring Michael Bay. You're the people like who just did not know anything at all about that abuser or that predator or that piece of shit. I'm like, you guys at that level that you're all honoring each other and blowing smoke up each other's asses, you know enough, most of you know enough
yeah,
about each other to know what's actually happening here, but they can't resist an awards. They
yeah.
can't resist giving each other plaques that show how great they are.
Congratulating themselves. It's like when Fury
Mm-hmm.
Road was nominated for all those Oscars, and it was the best movie of 2015. Let's just
Of
hands
course
down,
it
it
was.
was the best movie.
Absolutely.
What won Best Picture at the Oscars? Spotlight, a movie everybody quickly forgot about. Yeah, it was fine, and it's an important subject matter, but it would have been better served as a documentary, not a
Well,
fictional
I like
piece.
the film. I just think
It's
that
good, but it ain't Fury
everything
Road.
that the Oscars in particular are really good at the
Dropping a veneer over the
self-congratulatory
whole industry.
bullshit of like the self-congratulatory stuff around we're doing important work here, Jesse. We're doing God's work. We're doing we're doing we're shedding light on these important human problems, these important societal, cultural issues, and I'm like, right, okay, so on that production, do you care at all that a grip driving home after working 14 hours crashed his car and was paralyzed? Do you care at all about that? Like if in your grand, wonderful, amazing, thought-provoking work, which often this work is exactly that. I'm not dissing that. I have no regrets about devoting my adult life to writing about this stuff. But what I will say is great, cool. I hope that was a really good set to work on, a collaborative, respectful environment, because the film itself was phenomenal and
Yeah,
still one of the greatest films of all time, I think. So, I mean, I just want to know that if, as I said before, if in pursuit of your story illuminating or deeply examining in a profound way the human condition, if in pursuit of that you allowed, encouraged, or enabled the destruction of human beings' spirits or bodies or careers, then fuck your film.
yeah,
Fuck your show. I don't give a shit. Not one person should be destroyed so that you can bring a work of art into the world. Like again, I know that occasionally like someone gets hit by lightning. You can't control that. But what I'm saying is if toxic, abusive, exploitative dynamics meant that even one human being was permanently altered for the much worse as a result of your production making choices that it did not have to make, eat
yeah.
shit as far as I'm concerned.
It's
It's
exactly
not
how I
worth
feel.
it.
Yeah. I have a few other small notes. We've gone way past our
Sure.
original time,
Oh,
but I have a few other small notes. One note I have here is cancel Saturday Night Live. Not like cancel it, like cancel. I mean, just like cancel the show because who fucking watches it anymore? Uh,
that
God.
will not happen because it makes a buttload of money
Oh,
for a big
why?
conglomerate.
When
Yeah, I know.
when I think you should
Yeah.
leave on Netflix is like killing it with comedy, and that crap's
Mhm.
still on the air. It's like ugh.
Well,
55 burgers,
you know
55
what?
fries. God.
Mhm.
One other thing. So Battlestar Galactica. I want to talk about the
Yeah.
Nikki Klein situation. I think I'm friends
What
with her
about
on.
it?
I think I'm friends with her on Facebook. I think maybe I don't
Yeah.
know the Nixium cult situation and
Yeah.
how she left the show because she's like, well, I want to leave. It's like it was her person that was in charge of her was telling her to leave the show. Is that true or is that just rumor?
Honestly, I've not done any reporting. I did write in my book briefly about, just a very tangential interaction with Nikki that I had. I mean, aside from watching the show, I have not done reporting on that. I don't actually know what went down. I did watch the Nexium documentary. So, but it's all of that's it's fuzzy in my brain
Yeah, that's a.
pre-pandemic.
Oof.
Um, yeah, no, I just think whatever happened there, um, I wish I could sit here and say that vulnerable people in creative industries being in such a vulnerable position that they start to believe in things that are truly damaging to themselves and other people and start acting on those damaging beliefs. It's just that's why I put the Nikki Klein encounter that I recalled at the end of this chapter about child actors.
Yeah.
Obviously Nikki was an adult at the time, but I think there are a lot of people who come into the business who are young and who are torn to shreds by managers and casting directors and um, directors, and I'm just saying, just in general, especially, I gotta say, I don't think the industry is easy on anyone in terms of especially people's appearances and so forth. It's brutal, but I think women got a special dose of brutality, and I think that it's really tragic to me when people who I think have real potential as creative people and artists, and I can't say it's always because they were vulnerable or the industry did this or that, but when they are basically essentially a very put they're in a headspace where they're vulnerable to things that sound attractive but end up being deeply ugly and regressive. And again, it's just she's not the only one. She's
Mm,
not the only one. There are so many cults and fraudsters and exploiters that have fed upon the vulnerabilities that Hollywood, if not creates, then increases
yeah.
for so long. And you know, it's just a sad thing to me. And I honestly hope if Nikki Klein is in a better place than she was years ago when she was, you know, perhaps more closely aligned with certain people, that's all to the good. But yeah, that was I just you just never know. I mean, sometimes having you come across people in your career where you're like, wait, that person went down that road. It just is so. It's just so
Um.
sad because I
Uh,
think there's a lot of people like we were talking about. Just to bring it full circle, there are people who come into the industry with their full heart and their full enthusiasm, and they're just the way that that gets
ripped
twisted
out of them.
around sometimes
Yeah.
or ripped out of them or taken and used for a darker purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. I
It's
can't think of
sad.
anybody on my side of the business that ever experienced that. I mean, I can only speak to my own personal feelings. Is that I studied film for years and years in college, made some stuff in college, and I wanted to be a filmmaker myself. And I was the filmmaking crew I used to be associated with. It was part of the podcast crew. We went up to Salem a couple of years back to work to make a movie. Unfortunately, we didn't finish it. Ran out of money. As it goes with independent productions. Um, but in terms of my own enthusiasm about the business, like I said, I've only seen 5 movies this year, and I'm only watching one
Mhm.
TV show. Like I just
Mhm.
there's that part in the book where it's like I think it's a PA that's part of the casting department just has so much enthusiasm going in, and then it just gets beaten
Mhm.
out of them by people that
Yeah.
just have this system crushing them down, and that's how I feel. It's like that's part of why
Yeah.
I left. It's like it wasn't fun anymore. It stopped being
No, I totally
fun.
get that. I think that I needed to not be. I mean, I did go from being a full-time, critic reporter on staff to doing this book, which is essentially a very full-time job and also freelance at the same time. So I was sort of double full-time in a weird way, but not like on staff anywhere. Um, but yeah, I can definitely understand that. I do, and there's certain names now when they come up in the credits where I just am like, no, we're not doing. I'm not. I
Yeah.
can't. You know what I mean? But I weirdly enough, I don't know if you'll encounter this, but I feel like I have gone back and just done some rewatches. I feel like being less enmeshed at the heart of the machine has allowed me to kind of regrow at least some of my enthusiasm or some of my love. Because the thing is, I will never not love good storytelling. Like I'm a big reader, it's just my DNA. It's just how I function in the world.
Same.
Like, I
I have
just
10
want,
bookshelves in the other room right now.
I'm constantly, we had a book swap at my book club the other day, and I'm like, I brought 9 books, and I'm
I've
constantly
done
trying
that
to
so
like
many times.
rotate through, you know. Yeah, so look, I think that there are people in this industry who are in it for the right reasons, treat people the right way, and end up telling pretty good stories. And I hope that they feel encouraged by the fact that, um, as painful as it has been for many people to read or be part of the reporting that has gone on, especially the last decade, I think it's made a difference in terms of changing the conversation and changing the considerations,
Hmm.
you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's never too late for somebody to kind of admit their faults and kind of pull their shit together. I mean, one of the best
Yeah.
Hollywood redemption stories I can think of in the recent years is James Gunn going from, being fired from Marvel for very awful tweets from years ago when he was much younger. For
Yeah.
good reason, he was fired and he acknowledged it. He apologized, moved over to DC. He made great stuff there, and now he's in charge at DC. And I mean,
That's
he
why a big
acknowledged his
yeah.
faults.
I wrote I really, 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 when I pitched this book, the last third of the book is solutions.
Yeah,
And one of the big chapters that's kind of the hinge point from, okay, this stuff sucked. Here, the hinge point that leads you into the solutions section is about what is the path back.
yeah,
It's not hiring a guru to give you a juice cleanse. Fuck
yeah,
that. It's not that. You know, we have to set up much more robust systems of guardrails that really work, because there are predators, there are sadists, there are giant pieces of shit who won't change. And the
yeah,
industry has to just take off its rose colored glasses and really confront the fact redemption and catharsis are not always possible, maybe in narrative, but in the real world, they don't always happen. You got to have guardrails that protect the vulnerable. So, but aside from that, okay, people fuck up all the time. How do we
yeah,
move forward? What does that really look like? And, you know, by the time someone gets to me, a reporter or someone like me, they have typically tried other ways of solving the problem or addressing the problem, and they've come up against a brick wall time and again.
yeah. It's
So,
like in a situation like if somebody was assaulted on set, typically you would go to the cops. Well, and then you would
mhm,
probably go to the producers. Well,
mhm,
they are the cops. It's like you can't. There's nothing. They're just gonna. In America, we typically hear stories about that, and typically the accuser is the one that gets asked the question first, or the
mhm,
accused gets asked the questions first, and then the accuser is brought in.
mhm,
They'll typically stand behind the person that's been accused because if that person makes more money than
mhm.
the accuser, they're going to defend that. Kevin Spacey, prime example. He was the moneymaker on House of Cards, so they let it go for 6.5 goddamn seasons.
Yeah. If you, uh, if the person engaging in the actions that are like really horrific is, you know, the boom operator, that
Yeah,
doesn't continue for more than like an hour, right? Like,
yeah,
it just doesn't. It does not continue. Yeah.
yeah. The expendable nature of people on set. It's just I got
Well,
tired of.
some are
Yeah,
expendable, some are not, and that's
yeah,
the hinge of the
yeah.
problem.
I was expendable, and I got tired of just being a number on a call sheet.
Hmm.
I finally just said, "I've had enough." You know, and
Yep.
since I've left the business, I've gone into doing, like, stagehand and lighting tech work. I'm given a lot more responsibility. I tried to work my way
Wow.
up to being a best boy, gaffer, key grip. I tried. I kept pushing and pushing, and the old guys either wouldn't retire or they wouldn't die. And I just finally said, "Fuck it." I got tired of being just a third electric on set.
Yeah.
So now that I'm
Yeah.
in
And
just the stagehand world, I have my own rate. I'm in charge of various crews. I get more respect. I have various clients that I work with.
I
I'm
have a
doing much
lot of
better now.
relatives wuu are in the Chicago Stagehands Union, so I know exactly. Yeah. long time ago, I got to go meet or see, like, we used to see productions basically from the booth. Like,
Mhm.
we would, like, if a big Broadway production came through Chicago, we'd get to watch, The King and I from the booth because
Oh, I'm
one of my
jealous.
cousins, yeah, was like basically very high up in the Chicago Stagehands Union. So yeah, I mean, it bums me out when people are um driven out of the industry, but you're not the only one. You're not the
Oh
only
yeah.
one at all, and it bums me out a lot because I feel horrible about how much that's happened in recent times because I was one of many people agitating to make the industry more inclusive, more welcoming, more just good to everyone, right? And so what the bean counters and the rapacious profiteers have done is make it so that very few people can earn a living in which these in the cities in which these films and shows are being made. It's becoming increasingly untenable. You cannot have rents doubling and tripling in most of these, North American or UK cities, but the wages have gone down in real time or held maybe firm, but you're only getting those wages 6 weeks of the year,
Yeah.
if that. That's
Can't live
not
on
a
that.
way to live. You can't live on that. It's not real.
Yeah. It's an absolute mess financially
It
for the
is.
world. And it, like you're saying, the constant growth of the industry. Like we had that in 2008. Everything just going up and up and up. And what happens when everything keeps reaching its peak? It crashes. It's. I feel like
Right.
we're
And the
we're due
people
for
who
another
cashed a lot
crash.
of big paychecks will continue to cash a lot of big paychecks. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm taking it as a given that the economy is going to tank next year or the year after.
I mean, if Trump gets through with his tariffs, that's gonna crash the economy. Like, because he's an idiot. He doesn't understand how
He
economics works. You
does
can't
not
put
understand. And
cannot put
honestly,
that.
the
Ugh.
studios are not letting that slide by either. They understand how ruinous the tariffs would be for them. Hence, again, why are all those why are all these big media firms and studios going and kissing the ring at Mar-a-Lago?
Mhm. Because
They
they
understand that
yeah.
they don't want these ruinous tariffs. They don't want the economy to be tanked. Um, and yeah, it's gonna be, oof, boy, something else. I don't know.
They say every empire only lasts 250 years. We're there.
Well, I would say we'd had a good run, but
We
Hollywood's only at about
didn't have a good run. We gave it a good
120.
shot.
We gave it a good. We tried.
Yeah, we
Oh man,
tried.
we
So,
tried.
yeah.
We did.
Well, I think that pretty much covers all my notes. I mean, there was things we kind of
Excellent.
touched on, like, creative types behave like assholes. We started that at the beginning of the episode. So, let me run
Yeah.
through real quick. Why is it so difficult being nice, decent persons? Like we kind of covered that. Oh, unreasonable demands, not letting people tend to their lives, damaging creativity in the production process. I kind of brought up the Zack Snyder Justice League situation, how he was fired while he was away dealing with his daughter's death. He was fired. He didn't quit. He was actually fired. That's pretty shitty to cut somebody loose when they're
Yeah,
dealing with
but
the
then
death
they
of their
brought
daughter.
in the great person known as Joss Whedon,
Oh god damn it.
so that fixed it.
Oh god, yeah, I asked you about that. I was like, why did you not bring up the Joss Whedon situation? Because that's a giant well to go
Well,
down.
but yeah, but honestly, that's a heartbreak. It's a heartbreak. A lot of these things are just
That's performatory bullshit that Joss Whedon was doing. Like all that, the
right. But
Buffy and
who?
Angel and Firefly, all that's performatory. It's all bullshit. So
Yeah, I mean, I can't. I mean, I don't know. It's weird, but the bar for how someone was supposed to be, at least in the public perception, the bar was so low that to
yeah,
sprint right over it, um, yeah, that's really hard. What's really hard for me, and I'll say that this applies to a lot of people, some of whom I've reported on, is how can your work contain this compassion, this empathy, this work in which at times I feel deeply seen, and then you took the power that you had as a result of being good at this kind of work and you used it in ways that were so terrible, I
hmm
kind of can't wrap my head around it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it really fucks with my head, just to sit there and think, Where did it come from? This deep empathy for the human condition and the particularities of certain kinds of, stress or joy or pain or suffering or excitement, like all of these things. How can you put that into your work and then you took the power that you got from making that and you hurt people with it
Yeah.
deliberately
Yeah.
or indifferently? And I don't know which is worse.
It feels like it was for his own sadistic joy. I mean, I can. It's hard for me to watch anything Joss Whedon has ever been involved with at this point. It's like, I mean, I used to love Firefly. I love Firefly, and I even enjoyed the sequel movie Serenity. Although, considering the crux of that film is we're going to expose the truth, it's going to solve the problem. That doesn't happen. It doesn't work. The crux of that movie does not fucking work.
Yeah, been there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't work. But it's so difficult to divorce myself from that one. The
Right.
Neil Gaiman thing that crushed me. That one fucking crushed me when that cat when did you hear that interview, that audio that was recorded when he was saying to the person that he assaulted, I'm gonna donate X number of dollars to this charity and I'm gonna send you like 100,000 a year for therapy. It's like
Hmm.
admitting that he did it. It's like, what a creep.
Neil Gaiman, when I reported on him, called my work third rate gossip from hysterical reporters. And it was not third rate. It was a deeply sourced story about the many, many problems at American Gods.
God damn it.
And, you know, there's a word that I am determined to maybe try to introduce into to the human condition or the world: predemption. The predemption is how much have they already seeded the world with a positive image
Mhm.
so that people can just hook into what they want to believe rather than what is actually happening. After myself and a colleague did this deeply reported story about the massive problems at American Gods, and I'm not going to tell you that Neil Gaiman was 0% of those problems at American Gods. That's not the case. He went on a press tour for when the next season came out, shitting on this reporting that a colleague and I did, who between us have 50 years of experience reporting on things like this, and shitting on us in a very gendered way. But the predemption of Neil Gaiman is just our goth cool uncle and he's the greatest. You know what? At that time, this was whatever, 2018, 19, my general feeling was Neil Gaiman can go fuck himself because there's a way to deal with negative press attention. And to say that we were just passing around tabloidish third rate gossip and that we were hysterical,
Yeah.
okay, that's not the way. But what we know about Neil Gaiman, as far as I'm aware, there's more than one story in the works about him, and
Mhm.
it's not going to get better. It's going to be worse.
Yeah.
And that's another case of I was never the hugest like Neil Gaiman head. I know people who were. I know people who knew him. And some people he was appropriate and generous to them, and some people not that. But how is there I've really wrestled with this question a lot with friends in the industry or friends in different creative storytelling spheres. What is it that allows people to have this kind of deep empathic tone to their work and then in reality treat people like shit? Is it like they're so head down in the story where they have the maximum power that when they come back to the real world, the idea that people are their own individuals and are not their little puppets for them to move around on the page,
Yeah.
then they get very angry. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people just start believing their own bullshit and start believing the very real hype of those around them. I mean, I feel like with a lot of artists, even if they don't commit misconduct, you can tell when everyone around them is on their payroll. Like, how many bands where you're like, you listen to the new album and you're like, oh, no one's telling you the truth anymore. This sucks. This
Yeah.
is really bad, but nobody who's around you wants to get on your bad side, and you have completely lost the plot, and you don't see that at all. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I wish I had an answer for that one.
Yeah, same thing with writer Warren. I mean, I know we're way over time, but
Yeah.
there's another writer, a comics writer, Warren Ellis, years ago,
Hmm.
got called out for. I think that website's still up. There's like 68 women called him
So many
out
of us.
for.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's like that. I used to love Warren Ellis's work. I would look up interviews with him. I've read so many of his comics. Planetary is one of my favorite comic books. You know, his work
Yeah.
is incredible. And
Yeah.
he was always about, strong women, powerful women in positions of authority and control, and like they were tough and they were gruff and they wouldn't take any shit. And they could also be, they'd have feminine qualities, and they would be in LGBTQ relationships, and it's like all this stuff. And you look at how he was behaving off on his own, and
Hmm.
again, it all feels performative. It all feels like it's just an
Or
act.
I think there's a
How does
level
somebody
of
become that?
obliviousness. Somebody becomes oblivious to there's no upside for anyone pointing out to them that they are treating people cruelly or obliviously or selfishly.
Yeah,
When if you're surrounded by lackeys and wannabes and flunkies and people who want to ride your coattails or make money, I mean, the thing is, yeah, I've seen people thrive and prosper in various creative spheres not being a dick. I've also seen people thrive and prosper by attaching themselves to the coattails of someone who's absolutely a jackass, and either they know it and don't want to say it, or they just adopt that person's mentality so they no longer believe or try to convince themselves it's not wrong. Um, I don't know. With the Neil Gaiman stuff, with other Ellis, I mean, it's just there's a level of insulation from consequences at which you just stop thinking that any rules apply to you,
yeah,
unfortunately. And the more the world tells you, hands you an award, hands you a giant check, all of your reps, all of the people at the party, all of the people you meet, they want something from you. Your day to days that you have power over them, and no one has power or accountability over you.
yeah,
It warps the human brain. And I'd love to say that everyone can resist it. Some people just dive right in because they wanted to be a shitheel the whole time. And
mhm,
or they don't think their behavior is wrong.
yeah,
I don't know, man. I don't know. Some people are just abusive clinical narcissists who don't think or don't believe that they're abusive clinical narcissists, and it's in nobody else's interest to tell them that that's exactly what they are.
yeah. Going back to Warren Ellis, there's a comic he did years ago called Transmetropolitan, which is about a character named Spider Jerusalem. It's kind of like a Hunter Thompson type character in the twisted sci-fi future who's reporting gonzo journalism. It's just Hunter S. Thompson. Um,
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
the character is straight up just a self-indulgent narcissist, a complete asshole, treats everyone like shit. And Warren Ellis in multiple interviews says, "I'm not Spider Jerusalem." In retrospect, yeah, he is. He's just that character. He's just that guy. He's just an asshole. It's like,
But even
it,
so, like nothing in the world is like Breaking Bad's very dark. Vince Gilligan's not like that,
yeah,
and he doesn't treat people like shit. If you go on the IMDb page of every Vince Gilligan show, there's no turnover.
yeah, it's
He
true.
doesn't get off on treating people like dog shit.
I've heard the same thing about Brian Fuller and Noah Hawley. They're great showrunners as well. It's like that's one thing I to finally wrap all this up. Like that, I know this is a downer interview to everybody out there that's listening to this.
No, this is fun.
Oh,
What?
it's
I'm
fun
kidding.
hearing how
No.
the industry beat me into the
Ah,
pavement, beat both of us into the
yeah,
pavement. But
exactly.
there are good people in this business.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I will not let myself, I mean, I can't tell other people what to do. I will not let myself, I mean, nihilism's just boring, if nothing else. It's boring because it's predictable.
It's actually funny when it's in the
Total
Big Lebowski and the nihilists get beaten up. That's the only good part of it.
total cynicism and nihilism is just super boring and super blah. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to let myself forget about all the people who easily could have done the shittiest possible thing and gone down the bad paths, and they didn't. That is also a choice. People have autonomy. They're making choices. And the way I view it is this person who's been on set for 12 hours and just wants to go home, I'm like, I go by how stringently I assess someone's behavior by where they are on the food chain. Who greenlit that production? Who's paying for it? Who could stop this? Who on set now could stop it? Who at the studio or anywhere else could stop it?
Yeah.
Of course, everyone on that set has some degree of autonomy, you would hope. But the people who have the most protection from bad outcomes if they call this shit out and the most power to change things, it's those people who I'm looking at most closely. Everyone else, it's not that they get a pass. There is less autonomy with the person who's just trying to get home and pay their bills.
Yeah. Yeah. When we talked with Oren Soffer last year, we were discussing work days and how long hours can be crushing to a crew. Even he agreed, yeah, even 10 hours is too long because you factor in drive time. That's an hour to
Yeah.
the set and an hour home from set. That's your 12-hour day right there.
And the thing I always think about is, you know, like, I'm not saying actors have it worse, but someone where they're rewriting stuff on the fly, if you've worked a 14-hour day, you get in the car, you take off the makeup, you go home, you have to turn around and go back to set 3 hours, 4 hours later.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, you've got to learn a bunch of new dialogue.
Yeah.
That's
Like, how does
still
anybody work like that?
torture. You can't. And
Yeah.
then that person gets written, like, then they'll start leaking tabloids or calling them, oh, this person's a handful, this person's a difficult. They're working 100-hour weeks in the heat, getting new pages every day. Everyone on set is fighting. All the people with power are being dicks to each other, and they're getting 2 hours of sleep a night.
Yeah.
I sometimes look at how people have been asked to behave under those conditions. I would have been a much bigger problem under those conditions. Like, I can't. How people put up with that for months at a time is just beyond me.
Yeah,
It's
I
not human.
despise the long hours. I mean, granted, even as a stagehand now and as a lighting tech, I work long hours. Just yesterday, I was a lighting guy for a holiday party. It was my last work day of the year. I was there from 10 a.m. till 2 a.m. Long day,
Wow,
but
long day.
it was that's very rare. It's very
Yeah,
rare. It's a holiday party. I'm there from sun up to sundown. It's rare, so I'm willing to do that. But if that was every single day, I'd be a little crabby too. You
yeah. When
know?
they say, "Oh, that star was acting out," I'm like, "Yeah, I would be if I had an abusive piece of shit screaming in my face every day, and I had not gotten a full night's sleep in months. Yeah, I would act out too, a whole bunch. You better believe that,
Yeah.
you know."
It doesn't make you seem
Anyway,
weak that you wanna have a good night's sleep, you
yeah,
know?
that's just a normal human thing that people need. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, through all my notes Muppet TV show, how did you fuck this up? Yes, you know. So,
Hollywood.
yeah. Who was that show even for? Like, there's a joke in the show where it's
Oh,
like
that's a
Fozzie
question I ask about a lot of things. Who
yeah,
is this for? Who wanted the Dexter Babies show that is out there now?
oh, yeah, like,
We already had the flashbacks in the original Dexter, which was so played out by the end that it was just ridiculous.
and they
So
fucked
what
up
we have now is yet another. I'm like, oh my, who is this for?
yeah, and they fucked
No
up the
one knows.
ending twice. Jesus Christ. Yeah, but
Ah, Hollywood.
do you see it getting any better? Do you see it improving? I mean, the next 4 years under the
I
Trump
do think that
administration is
there's
gonna be
more
rough.
awareness of the people in the trenches that um, whether or not they can do something about it, there's much more awareness of what true norms should be and what the norms of human decency always have been and what they should be. Yes, I do. I do. I think that, sometimes you hear this thing of like people aren't willing to pay their dues. No, people are setting boundaries around abusive dynamics.
Yeah.
That's a different thing than what occasionally you have someone who's entitled and doesn't work hard enough and doesn't deserve the promotion or whatever it is. Yeah,
I've
that
seen
happens
plenty of
all the
those
time.
guys.
That happened before. There's plenty of that happens in the world. But there's also a thing in every industry, but especially creative industries with these very massive power disparities. No, what you're describing is people are willing to draw a line and have a boundary and not have a situation where they are regularly in an abusive, exploitative, or unprofessional environment. Yeah, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
They're not babies. They're not whiny. They're not willing to put up with the kind of abusive bullshit that as a young reporter I often put up with because it was how you had a thick skin. No, that's not what we're doing here. That's not what that is. So I am heartened by the fact that the people in the trenches, at least to each other, have each other as a resource and can say, not all the time, some people you work with are jerks, but a lot more people have a lot more awareness of not just how it should be, but how it can be. And I'm not saying it's always going to be the case that they can go to the press. That is a card that more people know that they can play.
Yeah. Certain people in the press. Let's specify that.
Yeah.
If you were to go to
Well,
ABC News, that might get filtered out because hey, ABC did go down and kiss the ring at Mar-a-Lago.
mhm.
So I would say there's certain
Yeah, I mean,
people.
my profession is
Yeah.
very much in a free fall, so I'm not saying that that's always going to be the thing, but I don't think that at least among the people in the rank and file, I think that there has been certainly since I began reporting on the industry a wake up call and a very big mentality shift about what they should be expected to put up with,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing.
Yeah. So, so yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything. It's sorry we went way over time.
Yeah,
so,
it is what it is. We
so
have a
yeah,
lot to talk about.
yeah. So for everybody out there, if you're young and you're impressionable and you're just getting out of college, and you're like, I just want to go make movies. I want to have a good time. Read this book. It will sober you up so fucking fast.
You're
because
welcome.
yeah, thank you. it's
No, but I do believe forearmed. I want people to do that. I want if they want if that's the dream, go chase your dream.
yeah.
When you're young, that's the time to do it. But forewarned is forearmed. I'm a big planner. I'm a big researcher. Know what you're getting into,
Mhm.
and have people who have your back.
Yeah. Get
Friends,
yeah.
family, fellow people on the job, whatever it is. Have a plan. Know where your boundaries are. Have people who have your back. And when you see a raving asshole in the wild, just know that a lot of people don't like that person, even a
Mm,
little bit, and you're not alone.
yep. You don't have to eat shit to make a living.
You
You
don't.
don't have to. So,
No. And you can't always do the thing that you might want to do about that, but you can vote with your feet, and that person who's acting that way is going to have to live with who they were and how they got to where they are. And I know it's cold comfort to those of us who sometimes have trouble paying their bills, but the fact is, what did it get them?
mm,
The people who are abusive, okay, you're rich. I think some of these people, not all of them by for sure, at the bottom of their soul know that that was
not
a
worth it.
price they paid to end up with those riches or those accolades. They know it was wrong. And if honestly, if they want to do a real redemption arc for themselves, it's possible. And if they decide I'm going to go forward and create reparations for what I did, make real amends, and then help transform the industry for the better,
Mhm. Yeah.
that's a choice. Again, a choice that can be made.
Yeah. Awful people getting away with stuff. Like it's kind of like a pirate that's on a ship that's filled with gold and then they kill the whole crew and then they get shipwrecked. But it's like, well, I have all this money. Yes, but you're shipwrecked alone on an island.
Right. But it's no different
Congratulations.
from someone who's a shitty, cruel, abusive parent.
Yeah.
Okay, well, no one wants to come back to your house for Christmas, so good
Yeah.
job.
That's a
Hope you enjoy that.
that's a lot of the
Consequences of
current
your actions.
it's a lot of the current generation. A lot of people are not going to their families' houses for Christmas or Thanksgiving.
I love those articles that are like, why are people cutting ties with? Because some of their family members are real pieces of shit,
Yeah,
and they don't want
various
to be.
people.
In the
Yeah,
limited time that any of us have on this planet, guess what? There's no law that we have to spend our free time with people who are unrepentant assholes who do not and will not change.
yeah. Various people in my family voted for Trump. I don't interact with those people anymore.
Nope.
You
Why
made
don't
that
go on
choice.
Facebook?
Yeah,
See people, I'm like, I do not want to know this about you, but now I know, and goodbye. I
yeah,
don't care about you anymore.
yeah. So, as the cliched saying goes, it is what it is.
It is what it is. All
Yeah.
right.
So, all right. Thank you so much for taking the time for this. I'm sorry this went very long.
No, not at all. I
We originally
enjoyed it.
planned
I
an
mean,
hour. So,
well, we can't solve all the problems of Hollywood in 1 hour. It took us three, under
yeah.
three. So good for us. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for us. So, yeah. All right. So, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed
Thanks,
the
Jesse.
discussion. All right.
All right. Take
And
care.
good night.